Hey, hello, welcome. Welcome back at this strangest of strange times. I'm currently just sat in the studio. I'm doing this late in the day. This is Sunday evening before release tomorrow, which is the Monday. I think, is it the 23rd? 23rd tomorrow? Yeah, so just watching the updates on the news, what we should and shouldn't do, and how we should do it and how we shouldn't do it, and that there you just heard, I'll keep that in. I'm just getting messages from people, just messages. Some people sending me conspiracy insight, and conspiracy is such a tossed about word now that it feels naff, but certainly an alternative way of looking at things. Some people are sending me links to, other people are sending me links direct, kind of mainstream sort of narrative, and this is good and this is not, and these are the numbers and these aren't the numbers, and it's pretty crazy. So I guess most of you listening to this now are sat in your houses wondering what the fuck's going on, basically, because I know we are. We wanted to get the kids out. We've been in the house for kind of 3 days, wanted to get the kids out, and we live in a village in the back of nowhere, really, or certainly on the back of us, it's the back of nowhere. And we thought, right, well, we'll get on the bike so we can go for a ride. It's just us. Can we do that? Can't we do that? I mean, the kids need fresh air. They need to get out. They need to, see the earth. And, we've got that weird feeling of like, can we? Can't we? Should we? Shouldn't we? We know, my wife and I, we know how important it is that you must get fresh air and you must be mobile, you must be outside, you must get sunlight on your skin, you must do these things. And this isolation seems like we have to do it because of the vulnerable and all the things that are happening. So a weird time. I don't want to get too bogged down because there's much conversation by people who seem to know what they're on about. So I'll leave it there. What I will say is we did a bonus episode, Four Brothers, the first time we ever did it. It went out on Friday, and we released it at a weekend because it's a much more fun time podcast. It's built for just get together, have a beer, have a smoke, have a kickback, do whatever you do, and just, chill out and have some fun and a giggle. And it's gone down really, really nicely, and we've had some lovely feedback. And even us as brothers who, like most families, we're older now and we drifted apart a little bit, and it's not often that we get together and actually have some real downtime outside of just doing the do's, so it was awesome to get lovely feedback, and some people have messaged saying, that we had a really funny chemistry and looking forward to more, so that's been lovely, really nice. And the Americans as well. Hats off to the Americans. Thank you guys listening. I don't know how you lot feel over there. I guess we're all in the same boat. You seem on a reasonably similar timeline to us with regards to where we are. If you get stuck with the slang and the accents and our Britishness, especially the fact that we're in the kind of middle of nowhere because we're neither northern nor southern, apparently. I argue the fact that if you look at the map, we're kind of not far off of being parallel with the likes of Sheffield and Manchester. We're just across on the east coast. Those guys are up northwest. They're not a lot further above us, so I always feel like we're northern. We certainly feel more northern, but if you do get stuck with our accents, and even the Australians, just stick with it. You'll pick it up over time, and we will get better at not speaking over each other over time. So yeah, I'm really just taken aback by that, and I know that my brothers enjoyed it and a bit embarrassed, and all the usual things. I often say to people when they want to come on, or they ask me to come on. I had a friend of mine who I used to play music with years ago who's been listening and sent me a message, when are you going to interview the ex-drummer of this band and that band and this band? And I said, oh look, anytime, let's do it, it'd be great, it'd be an awesome thing to do. And then he kind of backed off a little bit and thought, the reality of actually chatting, and we all get a bit spooked by it, but it's a really therapeutic thing. And myself and my brothers finished a little bit drunk, of course, but in the aftermath, a bit of anxiety about, oh God, did we say this, did we say that? And I said, look, what we're doing it for is to be true. We're just chatting what we chat, how we chat it, and it is what it is. And people who find it and enjoy it and take it into their lives, that's because it's real. We're not trying to please anyone. We're certainly not running for office. So it is what it is. A little bit of professionalism will come along when we realise to let each other speak and finish stories and, know when to arc a conversation and when to move on from it. But it was awesome fun, and that's what I am in this for, is to have fun and to get some kind of therapy, some kind of connection, which is weird right now, isn't it? We're all whinging about, we're all lost in our phones and we're not connected anymore, and now we really are isolated in our houses, and all we have got is this kind of digital communication. Maybe we'll learn something after this. I think it would be really nice if we did pick up a little bit on the calling of our DNA, realise that the lives that we do lead are built on these kind of constructs, money and things and comfort. It's all wonderful, it's lovely, but I think we can certainly see already that, meaningful things, freedom, going out, doing things, seeing people, that's really important, and hopefully we can hang on to some of this after the fact. If we're not all, who knows? Anyway, so 4 Brothers, awesome. We're going to do it again. We also had a couple of messages because we did some promo for it where we just stuck the phone on with a wide lens and just caught a couple of clips, and we used those to give a little insight as to what was happening on the day, a little bit of video, and then we had some messages from various places saying, would we do a video one? And we've got plans to do video stuff. So we've talked about it, and I think now is the time to strike. So we are upgrading the studio. We are going to go full video for the podcast with switcher cameras and so on. So we're working on that right now. So in the future, there'll be video versions of these podcasts, and also we may even do some live stream ones with my brothers and people who are up for it. Maybe we'll pick a time if we're all trapped in the house, use some really cool interactive software so we can comment and you guys can chat and ask questions in real time. That'll be really cool. So we're working towards that. So all in all, really good response from 4 Brothers, and it's given us the wind in the sails, and we shall push on. Okay, we are brought to you by Go Deep Flotation and Lincoln Cryo Lab. I'm not going to bang on this week because I know that the cryo lab is still operational because you're just one person going into the ice cold. So I know that's operational. So if you do want to check that out, then it's www.lincolncryolab.co.uk. Go Deep Flotation. Those guys have had to shut their doors. So in the meantime, just Google them, follow them on the socials, check them out. Lovely people, and floating wherever you are. If you are in the back end of Texas, like some of you are, if you are in topside New York, like some of you are, if you're in California, then you guys are probably further along with this stuff than we are anyway. But the people in Belgium, in France, in Holland listening, Australia, check it out. Google floating, Google cryotherapy, because and I keep coming back to this fucking virus, I do apologise, but a big part of this is like, how unhealthy are we in the first place? I think we've got a skewed understanding of what we think health is these days. If you're not obese or if you're not emaciated, then you must be all right. But we are fed by the very people who are proudly, backing us and bailing us out and going to pay our bills, and all of a sudden they really care about us in the UK, the government. They're the same people who have dismantled this NHS and sold it off and just left it in the shadows, just stripped it to its bones. And I don't know about anybody in the UK, I don't know what it's like in these other countries I've just mentioned, but I can't go to it. I'm very rarely in a hospital. But when I was up there recently, in the last year or so, my daughter needed some chin gluing together. She'd slipped in the bath. I couldn't understand how I was in this place of health repair, and I couldn't walk round a corner without seeing a vending machine and a Coca-Cola machine. Now, you do the working out of that, this society, this culture that we live in certainly in this Western world, and I'm not going to go too deep and heavy into this, but we live on just processed sugar shite food that's been sold to us with it's just lies, essentially. I'm always dumbfounded. I nip to the local shop to grab some supplies of an evening at a weekend, and I'm standing in the queue. I'm 5-6 back in the queue, and I'm the way that my shop's laid out, I'm always stood next to the fizzy drinks, these just shelves and shelves of these colourful fizzy drinks. And I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at the Coke, and I'm like, 0 sugar, no sugar. I think, how the fuck is that legal? How is that legal? How can they write 0 sugar on a 2-litre bottle of Coke? I mean, anybody who's done any looking into anything like this, I mean, it's fucking mind-blowing. And if you haven't, I promise you, go and do it. Look into what is actually in a bottle of Coke. There's 300 or plus names for essentially sweeteners, sugar, and I guess that's what the loophole is. It's not outright sugar, it's fructose, or it's, I think what the one in Coke is aspartame, I think. I mean, there's like I say, there's hundreds, literally hundreds of names for different versions of processed and refined sweeteners and sugars that are in these drinks. And at the time we're in now, and we're bailing everybody out, and the NHS can't cope, and they've just had to literally pay thousands and thousands of pounds to hire back hospital beds from private hospitals that we sold to the private hospitals when we dissected and just, broken down our NHS. I think it's just slightly ironic, and I think individually, certainly people listening to this and listening to podcasts, you're already seeking out knowledge and entertainment and news from alternative routes other than the mainstream news. You're already on that path. But yeah, we're in a pandemic at the moment, and maybe the pandemic is the virus, and maybe it's highlighting that we run on some pretty shitty cultural values, fast food, get the money, work hard, get the thing, get the credit, pay, buy now, pay later, get one of these, get 2 of these, move on. Yeah, I think health is something we need to pay attention to. So cryotherapy and floating, they're just 2 things that you just, if you can pull them off once a month, just that alone, if you get it to the end of a year and you've done 12 floats and 12 cryo sessions, your physicality, your body, your health, your mindset, your cognitive ability, your just human being is just elevated beyond what you can even imagine. And it's not just down to those minutes and those moments in those therapies. It's what it does to your psyche when you come out, the things you see. You come out after you get used to doing these things for a couple of 3 months. Someone's taken out your hard drive at the side of your temple there, cleaned your hard drive and put in a new operating system 2.0, and all of a sudden you can see bullshit from a fucking mile off, and you feel a whole different frequency. So I think there's something to be said for this time we're in and trying to pay attention to what we're actually doing with ourselves. Anyway, I'm going on. Today's episode is Mrs. Jane Martin, and ironically, timing-wise, this is just fallen how it's fallen, which is lovely. Fascinating story Jane has. I won't go too far into it, but essentially she was a high-flying financier, graduated from the London School of Economics, headed over to Hong Kong eventually, was the global portfolio manager for the property division in HSBC, and she was living that life until one day she had a vaccine that was administered to her that had a terrible adverse effect with her. She felt something brewing on the way up to that, as you'll hear. She's now a practicing shaman. She's a holistic practitioner. She's got her project called The Heart Shed, and she is a super cool lady. This is an amazing story. It's a long one, but you've got time. So enjoy it, guys. If you do like this, if you do feel like maybe, other people have got time that and they might enjoy this or they could take something from it, then do like and subscribe. If you're on Apple iTunes, just a review it means the world to us, because slowly but surely we're building momentum now. We've got another exciting Pod Bible announcement to make, which we'll make over the coming weeks, coming episodes. But each and every time someone likes something, someone shares something, someone sends a link and certainly leaves us a review within the iTunes, it just does wonders for us. It's amazing. It really does. It helps people to sort of see it and find it, and we can build our little club that little bit more. So we really appreciate that. Okay, without further ado, this is episode number 7 of the Chew the Chat podcast with Jane Martin.
Welcome to Chew the Chat podcast.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I don't see him much. He's always working. He's obsessed with what he does. He's constantly going on research about it, because they do new stuff about how, just working on changing the energy meridians, pulling on Chinese medicine and everything is he's just constantly looking for how the body is reworking itself and how it heals itself. So he just worked.
At what point did you realise that you were next door neighbours? How did that
when
come
I
up?
filled in the form.
The address, and he's kind of said...
when I went for my first session. So it was quite early on, but it was out at the end of it. He goes, I live next door. Mad.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Jane Martin.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Are you... okay, a bit of background is... off the bat is... You've had a kind of a full-on last few years.
Pretty full-on, yeah.
Yeah? 2016, It all changed for you.
It did. It changed pretty dramatically. But then when I look at it, things were leading up to it anyway that I just didn't see. So, pretty full-on.
Okay, so you were a high-flying financier, kind of a banker... HSBC.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of a background as to what your career was doing up until 2016.
Yeah, so I was working in Hong Kong. Been there for 20 years. Gone over there. I'd like to say for a job, but actually the guy that I was seeing at the time went over there, and the company I was working with at the time, I sort of said, can I move there? I said, yeah. It was just so easy. So I moved over there. We split up. But I stayed, he stayed, actually. He's now married to a friend of mine, but that's another story. But, yeah, so I spent a lot of time in Asia, and ultimately about 10 years ago started working for HSBC, looking after their, not in the banking side of it as such, but in the sort of the operational bit, looking after all their real estate. And, got promoted very quickly, was soon running the sort of whole global function. Flying around the world, had sort of 600 people working for me.
Wow.
And yeah, on this, I loved my job. Hong Kong was great. The lifestyle was amazing. I was getting paid a lot of money. It was all, when you look at it and stand back from it, it was all brilliant. But it all crashed down. And when I look at the reasons behind that, I've realised actually now that the more you try and analyse some of the reasons, there's actually not a lot of point in it. It happened. Mm. But it was, you'll have to tell me what you want to know about it, because it was certainly an experience. And it's been a difficult process because, when something like that happens to someone like me, that on the face of it, well, not on the face of it, actually has everything that you'd think you'd want in the world, like good job, lots of international travel, earning a decent amount of money, married, kids, everything looked perfect. And then this happens, and you go, well, shit, this doesn't happen. You almost feel like it shouldn't happen to you. My crash out, which was what it was, we'll come on to that, shouldn't happen to you because you've got everything going for you.
You've got the picture perfect advert.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so before we get to that kind of epiphany moment or breakdown or breakthrough, I prefer to probably call it, which is, fitting when, episode 3 was Amanda Winalski.
Yeah,
I don't know if you heard
brilliant,
that one, the Breakthrough Project.
Amazing.
But what we do like to do on Chew the Chat is I would like to go right back. Back. So what were the dynamics when you grew up? What put you on the path to becoming, an economic whiz, as it were? Where were you born? What was the situation with mum and dad? Where did you grow up? And what was the path leading to?
All right. I was born in Newcastle, so I'm a Geordie.
So is my wife.
Yeah, I know.
Awesome.
I love the accent when I hear it. I mean, obviously my accent's gone. My dad was an engineer. My mum, weirdly enough, she stopped working when she started having kids, but she used to work for HSBC, as was Midland Bank, years ago.
Okay.
Which was kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until more recently. So born in Newcastle, then we moved to Manchester, again following my dad's job. Then from Manchester, moved to Lincolnshire, and we were really brought up in Lincolnshire. Moved here about 40 years ago.
So that when you land in Lincolnshire, how old are you? Are you kind of
10?
You're just starting to get into serious, kind of go into bigger school and.
Yeah, no, 10. I was a little bit younger actually. No, that's not 7. 7.
Okay,
yeah, 7.
Okay. And how did you handle moving? Because obviously Newcastle and certainly Manchester, much bigger cities than Lincoln, but Lincolnshire as a county is a big county, I guess. But
Newcastle, I don't remember. I moved when I was 1. Mm-hmm. My relatives were all up there, so we used to go back there quite a lot until my granny passed away. Mm-hmm. Manchester, again, it was only, weirdly again, I don't remember much about being a kid in Manchester.
Okay.
But after I had this breakthrough, actually, after I had my daughter, I started getting memories back from that. And then as part of what happened with the breakdown, my brain started just coming back to things that happened pre-7. But it was a pretty normal childhood. Then my dad's job then took us here. Me and my 3 brothers, my eldest brother's my stepbrother, because my mum was married before, very briefly, to a South African guy who upped and left her.
Oh, no.
And she met my dad while she was singing in nightclubs.
Your mum was singing in nightclubs?
Yeah, and my dad was there. And apparently they started dating, and my mum didn't tell my dad about my brother.
Okay.
And they got engaged, and then she told him.
Oh, wow.
And he was bloody brilliant. He just sort of adopted him, and so he's been part of the family since then. But so we moved here, and then, life just was pretty cool. I went to the local primary school, then went to the girls' grammar school in Sleaford. My dad was working very hard. My mum was bringing us all up, 4 of us.
So when you say your mum was singing in nightclubs and stuff, so what was your mum's kind of vocation? What was her? She's
quite she's very outgoing, pretty, she's quite, she was and still is quite a vivacious, attractive lady. So if you asked her what her vocation was, she said, I don't know. I had a conversation with her the other day about it actually, and she said to me, I never understood that whole banking world you're in, because she just doesn't see I don't know the benefit. I think she probably thinks it's a bit soul destroying, and
confining or something.
Yeah, and but again, I've thought a lot about that. It's soul destroying in some ways, but in other ways, it's what you make of it and how much you project onto it. That's, again, we maybe come to that. Mm-hmm. But so her role was to bring us up, but she did a lot of amateur dramatics, and she's a brilliant singer, very vivacious. Actually, when my dad got his job, as he was CEO of a local company here. They didn't give him the job until they'd met her, which is a very traditional
Wow.
way of doing it,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
really mattered,
Yeah.
and they loved her. So she always jokes that she got him the job.
Yeah.
So it was like that. So she.
What was the dynamic between your mum and dad like then? What do you remember of that?
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting one. They're very different characters. They're still married. They live locally.
That's nice.
Yeah, very, very different characters. Again, he is very analytical, very solid. Not a lot seems to fluster him. My mum is much more outgoing. The flip side of that is she could be really sort of, she'd flare up at any moment. But again, when you look back at things and your perception changes, she had a lot of stuff on her plate. My dad used to travel a lot. She had 4 kids. So she was looking after all of us. But she was quite feisty and she was quite, loves being the centre of attention. She's an interesting woman.
And when your dad used to come back then, were they, do you remember them being sort of tactile and loving, or was it more practical? And
I don't really remember much about that. But I remember, and they'll hate me for this, I remember a lot of her sort of going off on one about things and him just keeping the peace around it.
Right.
I remember a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't all like that, but that's, when you're a kid, that's what sticks in your...
And what about with you kids then? What was she like with you kids? Was she a playful mum? Were you outdoorsy kind of kids, or was there a freedom, or was it strict?
No, not at all strict. We kind of just did our own thing, actually, which in some ways is quite liberating, but in other ways, what that started, I think, translating to for me is like, well, here I am. We just got on with stuff. We just did stuff, but she would do a lot of art stuff with us. She would, she'd play with us, but she was very much about herself. She had a lot of strong self-esteem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And she was doing a lot to support my dad in his career as well. So literally, they used to have mad parties and we'd just be sort of left to get on with it.
So in the house?
Yeah,
so lots of friends around?
Lots of very social.
Okay.
They were very social. They still are, really.
And how about you and your siblings then? So you've got obviously your older brother.
Yeah.
And then there's you, and then there's
two older brothers,
two
me,
older brothers.
And then my little brother.
Oh, so you and 3 brothers.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was an interesting dynamic. So there was, and my little brother's 7 years younger than me, so he came sort of later on.
Mm-hmm.
We always used to call him a mistake. Which was
and what was the gap between you guys then? Was it much between you and the older?
Nick is 65, so he's 4 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
Then Gordon's 6 years older.
Okay. But you guys were kind of... Did they look after you? Did you have to be toughen up and you're one of the lads?
Yeah, I ended up being quite a tomboy.
Mm-hmm.
We used to fight. Me and my eldest brothers used to fight like cats and dogs, and again, I think my mum just used to leave us
shut
to
the door.
it. Yeah, just, yeah. And, I never really thought about it much, but yeah, I ended up being quite a tough girl, which has its benefits.
Of course. I mean, if you're going to grow up with 3 brothers and it sounds like your mum's vivacious and...
Yeah.
So what was Dad like then? Would Dad come back from being away and be like, are you his little girl, or is he...
No.
No?
No, none of that. I mean, again, you always feel sort of... I think not guilty about me saying my dad wasn't affectionate. It's just not in his nature to show a lot of affection. He was affectionate to my mum, but it's just not how he was.
With you kids.
Yeah, but it didn't mean he didn't love us.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us have to come to terms with. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, when you think of your parents and you kind of say things out loud that you feel, but then it's not that you're not loved, or it's just you just recognise as you grow. I don't know. You have a hindsight. You have a feeling that well, maybe it wasn't quite like that, but you were loved. It's a strange thing.
Yeah, I don't really remember doing anything with him.
Right.
At all.
So did you feel close to them?
No. I almost didn't feel anything. If I felt close to anyone, it was my grandmother, my dad's mum, who, when my mum had my little brother, she had a very difficult birth with him, and it ended up both of them nearly not making it, and then they both survived, thankfully. And he was very slightly disabled when he was born. He still is, but you wouldn't notice it now. So that period after he was born, again, this started to come back to me. My granny kind of landed and just sort of took over because my mum was out of action for quite a while on that. So I was very close to her.
And was she kind of the archetypal,
Yeah, very stoic,
Yeah.
but very, she'd make us toast and marmalade and look after us. She would always look after us when my parents went away travelling and things like that. So she was, she was great.
And you're a parent.
Yes.
You have a daughter.
Yeah.
How old's your daughter?
She's 14 now.
14. So was there any conscious or subconscious sort of reflection on your own childhood that you brought forward when you became a parent that you were kind of aware of, do you think? Or did you not consider it? Or
Yeah, a lot, actually. So I think I was very overly conscious of... I used to hate my mum and dad when they were shouting and arguing, because I didn't know really what was going on. And my mum's feisty, and, looking back on it now, they love each other. And that's just how they expressed their relationship. And I always used to think, they get divorced, they split up, et cetera, et cetera. So I was always really conscious of, don't shout too much in front of Lucy. Make sure you're there for her. Because even though my mum was there, I never felt she was there.
Yeah.
Because she's not like your traditional, baking cookies, baking cakes mother. But then when I think about that, I don't think I even wanted that as well. It's, it's just, what do you want? You don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, especially when you are the child, when you're young.
Yeah, you really don't know. So with Lucy, I was probably too trying to make it all perfect for her and not argue and things like that, which was part and parcel, I think, of what ultimately led up to what happened to me in 2016. So, yeah, really conscious of it.
Yeah, isn't it? I'm similar in that way. There's so many things. I mean, the old adage is that you hear yourself becoming your parents, don't you? You say the things that they used to say to you, and you're I sound like my mum or my dad.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I mean, this podcast, its kind of inception, its whole thing was about, I'm just fascinated by how childhood is, as you've just pretty much said it there, you don't really know what you want when you're a kid.
No.
And it's only since I've gotten older and educated myself a little bit and kind of studied it and researched, the human condition is really, whether you're baking cakes or colouring in or climbing a mountain or just watching a film, all I can boil it down to is kind of just feeling like somebody wants you there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And that you're, it's a bit of a cliche, that you're seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not to be detrimental in any way to our parents, or
no.
It's just something I think culture and speed of life, I think we just kind of take it for granted, and we kind of, I don't know, I'm really aware of that. Yeah. I'm aware of some moments I'll look at the kids, put them to bed and think, God, I had it today. I took one of them to his class and just realised how big he's getting and how quick it's going.
Yes.
And that one day, daddy will become dad. And, cuddles in the kitchen and, come and tuck me in, Dad, don't go, Dad.
Yeah.
No, that will the love won't necessarily change, but the way we express it, and I don't know, there's something about children they're vulnerable is not the right word.
They're like sponges.
Yeah, and they're you're kind of loading the software or whatever it is, the operating programs into them.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something I find when I look at it, I think, oh, this is all going to be gone soon. They're just going to be big 20-year-old blokes with their own lives and all these wonderful little simple moments of cuddles and, and explaining sort of simple little things to them and how they work and what they mean will just be gone. And I think a lot of that can just be missing generally, for people and for children. And I think that you end up with that feeling that you mentioned there, where kind of just like...
And it sometimes can only take one thing. And to your point on programming, so, I've read a lot about this, and actually it starts to come to me naturally in a way about, when you're born in this life or any other life, you're literally born pure, for want of a better word. That's not pure as in...
like a blank canvas.
Yeah. But whether that was when you're born now or when you go back to the beginning of creation, you could get all esoteric about this. But literally, whatever environment you're born into, it starts to condition you and program you. And it can be something really tiny that will set off a program later on in life, and you're like, where the fuck did that come from? But it will be something that happened to you they don't even realise. Unintentional, intentional, whatever. And I think kids just, I certainly now in hindsight, you just absorb something and interpret it in a way, and then that starts to project through the rest of your life. So, my dad being away, he was away because he was working, he was doing the right thing for the family. My little brain probably interpreted it as like, well, where's my dad? He's not here. He's not with me. And to your point, I think kids just want to feel like they belong somewhere and someone's really paying attention to them and not criticising them all the time. And there's a fine line because you've got to teach them a bit of resilience as well. You can't sort of make everything perfect for kids, which is what I started to do with my daughter, actually. I started trying to make everything perfect, and it's just highway to nothing. Yeah. So it's that balance between being there but teaching them some sort of resilience as well and believing in themselves. Because somewhere along the line, I realised my belief in myself, and you would never have me pitch for this, just went. And I could probably start to take it way back to when I was a kid, because then I started overcompensating and constantly thinking about what do I need to do to be okay, to feel safe or loved or there, because I would, because I've been in a, for all intents and purposes, quite a good environment with my dad away a lot. My parents would argue because that's the feisty nature of their relationship, and you can only see that when you're an adult. I became hypersensitive to anything. I thought, well, what can I do to make sure everything's all right? Like people pleasing, that sort, and not in a sort of weak way, but it was certainly overcompensating, and all my actions were driven by making things okay. So for other people, so they would like me. And I think kids do that because they get programmed.
100%, yeah. 100%, yeah. I think you're exactly right. It's such a difficult thing to, especially when we're older, to try and remember. So, I mean, when you're rushing and you're stressing and you're right, we've got to go, and you're rushing the kids, and you forget. I know you mentioned it there. Maybe the balance. Sometimes I catch myself, and you're taking too long. We're walking. They're at 5.
Yeah.
And they're like, just, this is, they're not doing something wrong, but maybe I'm stressed and I'm pulling them along, and I'm sort of, and then how does that make them feel? And then how, like you said, it might be one of those days where daddy snaps a little bit, and then maybe that sets off something, a change subconsciously. Who knows? It is a difficult thing. Okay, so you get to Lincolnshire.
Yep.
You're kind of 9-ish.
8, yeah, probably.
Dad gets a good job.
Yeah.
your mum signs it off for him, so he gets it,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
And you settle down, and you start at primary school.
Yeah, in Bassingham.
In Bassingham.
Yeah.
In Bassingham. Excellent. Okay, so how does school go for you? How do you feel at school? What are you with your peers and socially? How do you find that?
Yeah, primary school was cool. I found it all right. I remember getting there, always conscious that I was always gotten with the boys, sort of.
Well, that's your environment. That's your
that
safe
was my
habitat,
environment.
isn't it?
Yeah, I had a couple of good girlfriends as well, but I was just again a real tomboy. But yeah, no really dodgy memories or bad memories about primary school. I do. Oh, I say that though, and again, it's back to my mum. I got mortified because my mum, she's very good looking when she was on. She's always she looked a bit like Elizabeth Taylor. Right?
Well, as you've been describing her, I've kind of been picturing that kind of almost like 50s kind of Hepburnish kind of lady. The kind of
So
suave swagger to them.
Yeah, exactly. But she's tiny. She's like 4'11". But she's got a
powerhouse.
Yeah. But I remember she would pick me up, and I remember hearing one of the teachers, obviously not knowing that, just saying how hot she was. And when you're a girl at that age,
and hearing your teachers,
and hear your teachers,
authoritative figures, talk
about your mum, and again with hindsight, not really being comfortable in my own skin as a girl, clearly, I think, or being surrounded by. It was just a bit of a. I remember going, oh God, that's really weird, and I think I would have been 8 at the time.
It stayed with you.
It stayed with me. And she'd kind of just come back into action because after she had my little brother, she had quite severe postnatal. And actually moving to Lincolnshire really sorted her out. She just...
What do you think? What was that then, do you think? Just
what caused it?
No, what helped to change, to help her
actually,
recover?
it was 2 things. Because she was... She has told me she was agoraphobic and again, she was quite a tough woman as well because when going off track a bit, when she was young, her mother was a working mother and she used to get home at age 5, sort of let herself in and out of... And
that would have been, women,
yeah, very unusual.
Yeah,
very unusual.
Working so much in those times.
Yeah, so she also didn't have anybody really...
So often what we see,
there.
The pattern.
Yeah, so you can see how it generates. I've missed my point now. What was I going to say? She...
We were just coming. What made it feel like it worked for her coming to Lincoln?
Oh yes, well I think just the association with Manchester, which was where she'd had my little brother. She became quite agoraphobic. Couldn't get out of the house for a while. Again, I don't really remember much of this. All I remember is my granny being around. So it was a combination of my granny, who was brilliant. She'd been on her own. My granddad died when she was quite young, left her with 2 young kids as well. But she would, she just came and sort of took any pills away from my mother, said, come on, get out.
Oh, I love that.
That's just amazing. Said, sort this out. And then they moved. And I think it just removed her from the situation and completely different environment. And she just...
Noticeably just lifted.
Yeah. But I don't really remember anything about her being... unwell, though I think a lot of the moods at the time probably reflected that. So it was the move and a change as good as a rest sometimes.
Have you ever spoken to your mum about that moment when you heard the teacher?
No, I haven't actually. That's interesting. I didn't really speak to my mum about anything like I'm talking to you about until after I had my breakdown. Okay,
so you've spoken to her, obviously, and we're moving and weaving towards that. But so as you're at primary school, you've had this moment that kind of colours peripherally. I don't know. Is it an understanding of yourself, or is there a how does that sit with you at that point?
She and I were so different in that. I mean, bear in mind, I think at this time I asked for my hair to be cut really short on one side and long on the other, and just was outside all the time playing. That was great, right? Just mucking out with my brothers. And my mum was just this beautiful.
Did she want you to be like a girly girl? Would she dress you up and
she would plait my hair and stuff like that. But I think yes and no. And I always started to feel like I could never be that sort of beautiful kind of thing. It was that kind of
intimidating in a way.
Maybe a little bit, yeah. Maybe a little bit. Yeah. So she, again, none of this intentional. It was just I started thinking, well, I couldn't compute her with me.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, of course. So in almost as if...
But I couldn't compute myself with my dad either. And lots of people say I'm much more like my dad. But I think I'm a mix of both. But I think at that time, I felt like weirdly like such an outsider. But I didn't even know it. And
yeah,
I felt really...
I think lots of people do feel like this, you know.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, I'm not unique.
So as you start to move into kind of adolescence and puberty and big school...
Yes.
How are you going through those transitions? Does mum sit with you, like when with girls, you sit down and say, right, these you're going to change, you're going to grow into a young...
No, none of that.
Like sort of guide you in, boys are going to start,
No, she didn't do... Not that I remember. Right, I could be doing her a massive disservice, but I don't.
Well, we'll get her on, and we'll.
Actually, you should. She's been an interesting one, actually.
Oh, well,
maybe you should do that. She'd love it.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting for you as well.
It would,
wouldn't it?
It would.
So you're going off to secondary school then, and is that in the city in Lincoln, or are you
at the girls' grammar school? Now here's an example of where they're really trying to do their best for the kids, right? So you have this impression that they don't like you, they don't love you, but my mum and my dad fought tooth and nail for me to do the 11 plus, so I could go to the grammar school instead of going to the local school. And my brothers had gone to the local schools, which was fine, but they wanted me to go to the all-girls school, and I did my 11 plus, passed, got in there. So they were transitioning me, I think, intellectually, but were they preparing me for that move?
Has anybody considered that you've just spent 11 years with boys and now you're going to be just with girls?
No.
I wonder if
that's interesting. That had never crossed my mind, actually.
Obviously you've been at primary school mixed, but like predominantly, you said it yourself, you're a tomboy, you're just mucking in with the boys. And then my wife went to an all-girls school. I don't know that many people because where I grew up, it wasn't really a thing. But when I speak to my wife about being at an all-girls school, I can't fathom being at an all-male school. So never mind if I'd have grown up with only sisters and then gone to only male school, like that is... Because all of those things that you've built in your mind, the parameters of social...
Yes.
They're all kind of like, whoa.
Yes.
So I wonder how was it for you?
It was, that's a really interesting perspective. I've never thought about it like that. It was good. It was fine. I loved school, actually. I got there. But I was always the tomboy.
How did the girls take you then? Did you get on with the girls as well? Did you
I did. I had a core group of good friends, and then I went through the usual teenage stuff of when we got a bit older. That do you look right? I didn't realize at the time, but probably had a semi-eating disorder because of a good friend of mine, Katie. She started there a couple of years later. Her parents were in the RAF close to here, up at Cranwell, and they got moved just before sixth form, and she came to live with us. And she again, it's another interesting dynamic, which I have realised. She was very pretty, like beautiful, right? And she was a good friend of mine, but there's this subconscious competition, I think.
Aware of her symmetry.
Yeah, it was a funny dynamic. And again, my brothers thought she was great, and we got on brilliantly now. But I think there was, again, the programs running underneath it all was probably something to do with, there's another very attractive
lady. Yeah.
And again, it's not that I'm unattractive, but in your head, I think lots of things were going on with that. But at school, I had a great school time. I was house captain. I was doing Duke of Edinburgh Award. Bit of a nerd, You
enjoyed the academic side, and
I did.
You were all right with the social stuff. No,
yeah. My sixth form, it all seemed absolutely fine, but always, I was always just slightly. I was never a very girly girl, so I was never sort of having all those sort of girly conversations. I was never quite sure where I fitted in. I think, in hindsight, you wouldn't look at me and think that, but I was just sort of.
Well, we're so good at that, aren't we? We're so good at blending and sort of adapting to the operating level on the surface of things.
Yeah,
as you mentioned there, you kind of we're operating on this level of acceptance socially. We say the right things, we do the right things, we try and perceive the correct actions, but you go down another 2 or 3 or 4 layers and there's all these sub layers of like, but what does that mean? That I know I should do that because that's what the culture, but then I feel like this, but then that's not, and that's very confusing when you're young. Hence, if you've got a mum and dad who sort of think, I'll check in with Jane because she's 15 and I've been, and she's probably going through, because I can remember what it was like to be 15, because that's, again, something I'm really trying to remember is, shit, they're 8, 9, they're whatever, what was I feeling like then? Because one thing that does stick with me, just as tangent slightly, I always remember adults who came into my life, might have been parents, friends, or whatever it may be, but someone who got down on their knees and kind of took the time to embrace you, rub you on the head, look you in the eyes, ask you how you were, give you a sweet. That sounds like, not the guy at the park who wants to give you a sweet, but do you know what I mean? Someone who might come round to your house who actually takes the time and sort of. I always remember those people. There was an energy that came there, and it might be what you're saying earlier about just someone recognising that you're here.
Yeah.
And I try and do that whenever there's friends' children or anything. I'll always take a moment to sort of let them know.
Yeah, that you've seen them.
Did you have any of that secondary school? Were mum and dad still where they were? Was it kind of,
so when I was at secondary, he was away working hard. My mum's. It shifted a bit as we all got a bit older. Obviously with my little brother, there was a lot of hospital visits to try and sort out his disabilities. So we'd just get shoved in the car, drove up to Sheffield to have his physiotherapy and stuff. Again, my mum doing a lot of this on her own because my dad's working. My oldest brothers, doing their own thing, fighting with me incessantly. I remember once building they used to shoot at me with cow cake from air pistols. Nice. But then I would sort of dig holes in the garden and put sticks in it so they'd fall down.
Oh, like booby trap kind of things. Yeah.
Stupid stuff like that, like bury their action men and things like that. But the dynamic was, was it any different to any other family? I don't know. But I always, what I do know it did is it made me I will rely on myself and nobody else. I was very like, well, I'll always be able to sort myself out. And I think that probably started at about 7, or maybe before then, but it was always like, I'm tough, I'm resilient, it doesn't really matter what anything happens, I can. So I became quite an introvert extrovert, if you know what I mean. So I'd be out there doing stuff, but really I'd be like, well, don't need anybody else, I can do it all myself.
You kind of confidently accepting, that maybe you've just got to crack on your own and I can do this.
Yeah, but what I subsequently learned, it was more out of I became tough through a fear that something bad might happen rather than a self-belief.
So school goes okay.
Yep.
Mum and dad aren't really checking in to say, what
No.
about boyfriends? Did you get a first boyfriend, and was there...
Yeah. So, well, actually, Mum and Dad not checking in just made me think about something, because academically, I was quite good. I never need to be pushed, whereas my brothers were, always just sort of having to push them. So there was a lot of tension.
So were they actively on top of your brothers? Come on, guys, we've got to get.
They
can
were
we do better? Can we do more?
They were dealing with things like my brother rewriting the exam because he couldn't answer the question, so he wrote his own, which I thought was
Brilliant.
quite innovative. But
That's that kid.
yeah. But so again, it's like they didn't really need to sort me out. It's like she sorted. So,
which is kind of a ailment of what you've just said, like sort of quite confidently realising, okay, well, I'm going to fend for myself, and I can.
Yeah. So then it generates.
It generates
itself.
that. Well, she's all right because she's tough.
Yeah, and always was. Yeah. So what was your question again?
So was there any boyfriends? Was there any moments in your, did you do anything crazy where mum and dad had to come and sort of step in and say, right, we need to have a chat, Jane?
So boyfriends, again, late developer, didn't really have a boyfriend until I was about 16. Then got my first serious boyfriend, 17. Weirdly enough, lived in Navenby. And his parents still live round the corner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that later on, I'm sure, because pre-podcast we were just chatting Navenby. Yeah.
So they never really stopped me from seeing anyone, but I was interested in horses and being outside. I had no interest in boys. And when that did start developing, they were pretty cool about it, but I don't remember any chats about it. I don't remember anything in particular. In fact, the first intervention I remember having was probably about age 18, and I think I probably had first had sex when I was 17, and getting down and dirty about it. My period had stopped, and I was like, oh shit, I'm pregnant, right? So I had to tell my mum about that. It's because I wasn't eating properly. Right. So that's another, but I remember sort of just telling her, and her being very practical about it, just taking me to the doctors. But she just took me to the doctors.
Sort of did the practical side, but didn't emotionally find out where you were.
Didn't have any emotional conversation about it whatsoever at all. So practically sorted out, nothing wrong, carried on. But they were quite uninvolved with the sorts of people I went out with. But I didn't go out with anybody
who would trigger a kind of, what's going on?
No. The only time, and this is very funny, the only time that my dad ever said something when I was a little bit older, which we'll probably get onto, and I was seeing this guy. I'd gone to university and I'd come back, and I went back to university, and I started seeing this guy. And my parents weren't sure about him, and I am now dating him.
Now?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Which is hysterical.
Okay, so that's going to weave its way back in.
And they love him.
But, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like it'll be
it's quite a funny dynamic. And again, it was my dad saying to me, I'd split up with him, and then I said, I'm going to go back with him. My dad said to me, he just said, do you think you really want to do that? And that was enough for him to me go, do I really want to do that? He didn't say don't. But because the nature of my dad is he never shouts, but if he makes a comment on anything or says anything, you really listen, because he rarely interferes, which is quite powerful, actually.
It is. It's probably more powerful than anything else.
Yeah, but it just made me go, oh God, I don't want to disappoint him, and should I? So I didn't start seeing him again. But think everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, totally, and clearly, as it comes back around.
Yeah.
Okay, then. So you mentioned university.
Yes.
So you've gotten through school. You by now you're pretty much in a strong momentum of, right, I just take care of business myself. You sound like you're making pretty sensible decisions.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm supported by my parents.
Yeah.
Intellectually.
Yeah. And you're in a safe family environment.
Yeah.
It's all there, like you said at the start. Everything's in the picture
as
it should be.
Yeah.
So university, then you go off
to London. Yeah.
To study.
So I got my A-levels, good A-levels, although my dad did say, what happened to I got 2 A's and a B, and my dad said, what happened to the other A? Mm-hmm. That stuck in my head for a long time, actually.
Just as simple as that again?
It was simple as that. He didn't even, I think he was joking, or was he? You know, I don't
you
I don't know, but my
that.
perfectionist thing went, Anyway, I went to London to study economics and geography at the London School of Economics, so brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah, but I didn't even realise at the time. I just went, went down to London, started the course.
Were you excited to go and do that? Did you feel like it was just kind of, this is the natural next step? It's like a routine?
Yeah, it was a routine, but again, slightly unusual. All my friends were going off to big campus universities in sort of provincial cities. But I chose to go to London, and it wasn't really like a campus. I was thrown right into the middle of central London. And coming from Lincolnshire, not being used to the city. And I don't know what made me do that. I think it was quite an unusual choice.
Was it your choice then? It wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dad saying, no, this is where
of course I rolled out which universities. I mean, I looked at Nottingham, looked at Durham, I looked at everywhere, and we went through it. But then I decided to go there. Started the course, but for some reason just didn't settle. I think it was a combination of just going to London, whole different ball game, getting flashed out on the street, or just a bunch of different things. And I just decided I didn't like it. And I was still seeing the guy just mentioned at the time. So I left, and I got a place.
Was he still back here then?
He was still back here, so I was sort of going up and down.
Of course, yeah.
A bit. So I wasn't really settling.
Yeah.
In either place.
Yeah. And at that age as well, when you're in a serious relationship like that, that's a strong pull, isn't it? To kind of start to justify any kind of wandering of.
Yeah. So got a place at Nottingham University, but then again and I've come to believe in synchronicities, through just a weird bunch of circumstances, the tutor from the LSE called me and sort of said, "Do you want to come back?" I was like, and I sat down and I talked it through. And most people in the UK, a lot of it just don't recognise the LSE as a sort of, but it is one of sort of the Ivy League schools for economics. So actually giving up a place there was a bit stupid. So I sort of sat down and spoke to a few people, and I decided to go back the following year, which was really good, on a slightly different course. And then loved it, had a great time. I think it was just a bit of a shock to the system the first time around. So thrown into that and thrown into an environment, centre of London, very international school. So lots of foreign students there, more foreign students than English students. Studying hard, met one of my best friends. She was in the dorm right next to me, who's still a brilliant friend now, and just sort of worked my way through it.
So just quickly,
yeah,
for the tutor or the lecturer to give you a call, what do you think triggered that for them to give you a call back? Had you stood out? Did they see your potential? Were you a model student? What do you think?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Something positive must have resonated because.
Well, I didn't get a first when I was there. I got a 2-1. So I don't know. I kind of gelled with him when we were doing the tutorials, and I kept in touch with him. And I think at that time they probably don't like to see decent students leave. I honestly don't know what it was, but he did it.
Amazing. So you did that then. You finished that.
Yeah.
And then what's the next move?
What after university?
Yeah.
I left university, clearly, and I'd been doing sort of odd jobs as you do to have some money while I was there. I didn't really want to come back up here straight away or at all at the time. So I started working. I stayed in London and I started working for a film company as a receptionist. And I got that job through contacts, as is the way in the film world, which I loved, but I couldn't afford to stay at it because they didn't pay anything. And there's a lot of trust fund kids there. And, I couldn't afford to justify living in London and stay. And also living in London and working is a very different thing to being a student there. So I did that and it was great. I used to get it was a funny dynamic, and it was a lesson for me. I remember I was working on reception and I was being a runner, and I get these calls, and I used to get told off for not knowing who these famous people were calling, right? And I'm just like, well,
who's this, please?
Yeah, and the slightly less famous people were the worst ones. Like one day I had Andy Garcia call me, and he was lovely, right? Sounds like name dropping. It's not. He was to have a chat, but then I get the sort of less famous, and don't you know who I am? I'm just like,
oh, the chip.
I'm like, oh my God, this is really weird. And I just, something that even then just made me start thinking about, this is a bit of a weird dynamic. But it was a lot of fun. Anyway, left. I got a job. I needed a job. And I got a job in a pharmaceutical repping. Which gave me some sales training and a car, because I just needed to do something. That was after working at our price for a bit and what have you, which I did and I was very good at, but I hated.
And what made you hate that then?
I just found I was never a big fan of hospitals. I just found the whole thing of taking drugs into doctors and being trained to sell to them in a certain way to make them prescribe things that might not necessarily be the best for the patient.
Oh my Lord, this is a podcast on its own. This.
Yeah, it was. I just the poor they didn't really want to see us, and we didn't, and it was just a strange environment. And
how much did you actually know about the drugs?
They train you. They train you, and the training was great. I had a lot of laugh. I met some good people, right? But they did give us a course in. One was a migraine drug, one was a fungal nail treatment drug, and one was what was the other one? HRT. Right. So those are the three products I was selling. And they give you background and they tell you about them. So you do know a little bit about the drug. But I felt like a fraud because I was sitting there talking to a doctor about not ailments, about conditions of people.
When you say HRT, is that like hormone
replacement therapy? Yeah. So for menopausal women.
Yeah.
But I was trying to sell something to a doctor who's been through years and years of training, on the basis of 6 weeks training about this drug and conditions and what have you. And it just didn't sit well. But I was good at it. But they even trained you to, and again, it's good psychology, is when you were holding your pen, you wave the pen around and then you take the doctor's eye to the card that you were showing them that had all the drug information on it. So they would follow it. So there was there was a lot of psychological...
That side of things. I mean, that's sales per se, whatever you're selling, isn't it? I mean, there's a whole body language mirroring thing that you do that, that is primal to us. We're looking for that kind of symmetry.
Yes.
But when you start to contrive it and build it to be a certain way, to a certain end...
Yeah.
That's a real dichotomy, isn't it, of like your ethical value, because you want to earn your money and you've got, but I don't know how much people know about what it is they're selling, especially knowing what we know now in 2020 with, kind of, the internet's kind of pulled the curtain back on what we can find out about these kinds of drugs, these kind of industries.
Exactly. And it was just... It was fun, and I didn't like the whole dynamic of, there was a lot of guys who are reps as well, and they always, the receptionists in doctor surgeries always loved the guys. They didn't really like the girls going in because it's just the dynamic.
Well, you're in this boring room for 9 hours, and then here comes the handsome, charismatic salesman who's going to give me some flirty jibes and
exactly. So it just. Again, it's hard to say it was bad. It just didn't sit with me very well. So, and I should have known because on the first day of the training, I crashed my car. So it should have been a sign. And I remember sort of driving around the M25 thinking, what am I doing? Even then, I was like, what am I doing? But it paid for a while. So I did that. And then I left because I didn't like it. And then I got a job working for the local government in social and economic development, which the subject area, I was doing a lot of that at school. So it was for a training and enterprise council who basically tried to invest in the local area. And it was Milton Keynes that I was working in to, attract jobs, do good social stuff to develop local economies. And because of my background and what I'd been studying, I actually found that really fascinating and really interesting. What can you do to generate more jobs in locations and things like that? So I worked for them for a while. I liked that, but I found the government bureaucracy around it a bit frustrating. And we were sending a lot of the work we were doing out to a consultant to advise us and then implement it. So I thought, right, screw that. I'll go and work for the consultant instead. Got paid more. So I then did that.
Okay.
Which again was good. Did that for a few years. And I was working for that consultancy company for a while. And there was a lot of stuff going on in the background personally behind that. But I was working for them. And when I was working for them, they got bought by a property company called DTZ. And it was when I wanted to go to Hong Kong that happened. And by some coincidence, one of the owners of DTZ was based in Hong Kong, who then became the chief executive of Hong Kong. So I ended up working for a property company, basically, doing economics for a property company. And that's the company that moved me to Hong Kong.
So when you said there was personal things going on as well, I just wanted to bring us back and kind of bring the listener with.
Yeah, I'm a bit all over the place.
No,
sorry.
no, you're not.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I'm just thinking you're going through these jobs. You've flown through uni. You're doing an interesting array of jobs. I mean, who remembers our price? By the way,
I know. I loved it
big
there.
Shout to our price.
I loved it.
So, were you speaking to mum and dad on the phone? Were you writing letters?
No,
were you checking
no.
in, or would it be kind of like it's Christmas and there's a card?
I'd see them more than Christmas time. I mean, when I started, I was living in Northamptonshire at the time when I was working for the first started working for the Training Enterprise Council, and actually when I was working for the pharmaceutical company. So I wasn't far away, and I'd see them every so often. And my older brother the reason I went to Northampton is because he'd moved there with his
my
job.
next question is: are you still sort of speaking to your brothers?
Yeah,
and are they
yeah.
still beating you up? And
Well, no. He'd gone there to work for a local estate agent, so that really was what took me there. So I'm seeing them, but I'm not on the phone every week or anything like that.
yeah, just keeping in the loop.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess then Hong Kong kind of appears. There's a avenue to really make a jump.
Yes.
Change.
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time. Hong Kong appears. Like I said, the guy that I was seeing at the time. By this time, I'd moved down to. I was living in Reading, Windsor area.
Yeah, I was born down there.
Oh yeah? Whereabouts?
I was born in Taplow in Maidenhead.
Okay, yeah.
In Berkshire.
Yeah. So actually that area was very alien to me. I found it. I quite like the more earthiness of I felt being from the north at the time, or London. So, but I moved there, and I've seen this guy who lived in London. He worked for Citibank. He was a trader. And introduced by the friend that I told you about that lived with us. She was at Bristol University, and it all sort of came together. He got moved. I've been seeing him for a while. I don't know why in hindsight for so long, but anyway. He's a lovely guy, but anyway.
Yeah.
And I said again, it was just a weird situation. The company had just been bought, and I said, look, have you got any jobs in Hong Kong? So I went over with him when he went for his interview and went into the offices of my company, met a guy there who subsequently emceed at my wedding, and sort of said, have you got any jobs? And he said, yes. So I got offered a job, and it was almost
just all happening.
It just happened.
Yeah.
And I remember getting on the Cathay plane from Heathrow to Hong Kong. I'd just been up to see my parents, and my friend took me to... Oh, there's another story as well. I'd been going out with the guy for about 7 years in Northampton. Lovely guy. Parents loved him. And my friend took me to who took me to Heathrow, is now married to him.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of a theme here.
Yeah.
No, this is another one.
Oh, right.
All my old boyfriends.
I like this community. You've got a sense of community.
I just train them and send them on. Anyway, so I moved out there.
Yeah.
I started working for DTZ and working for the guy who subsequently became the chief executive of Hong Kong. Not a very popular one, actually, in the end. And life just took a whole other...
How did you take to living in Southeast Asia then?
Very easily, really easily. It was Hong Kong's very.
Is this
did you go when you were living out there?
I never went to Hong Kong. I remember my mum going. My auntie was an air hostess for BA.
Yeah.
And my uncle was a captain pilot, and my mum would hop on and take trips. And I always remember Dubai and Hong Kong being like shopping trips. I remember that.
Yeah.
And this was, I guess, before the UK, England sort of handed back.
Yeah.
Was that late 90s?
97.
97, yeah. So is this pre-97?
No, it was 2001.
2001, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never got there. So how was it then? It seems electric when I look.
It is
I see
electric.
images,
It's an amazing. It's at the time, it's a very easy place to settle into.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of expats there to get to know. The work. I think if you had half a brain, and you could just worked hard, you could work hard and do something,
make something happen.
It was a very, I probably spent I was there 20 years, maybe the first 16 years, drinking way too much, partying way too hard, but working very hard at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very big but small community.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great. It was what was not to like about it, really.
And were you making regular trips back to the UK? Did you miss the UK in any way?
No, not really. It was such a weird thing. I kind of just got on a plane and went. But I was also running away from a bunch of stuff as well, because the bit we missed out was I'd started seeing this guy in Northampton, this rugby player, Ed, lovely guy, still friends with him now.
Mm-hmm.
But I screwed that up, self-sabotaged the whole relationship. But I kind of left. It was almost like I needed to leave a bunch of stuff that I'd got myself into personally behind. So it wasn't a hard thing to do.
So when you say you got yourself into things personally, or you self-sabotage the relationship, what do you think's behind that then? Were you partying and drinking here, or are you just kind of coping with something internally? Or?
Well, I didn't know at the time, but again, this has revealed itself to me as I've gone through this process. But I was seeing this guy, lovely guy. I keep saying that, don't I? Like I'm trying to justify him. He asked me to marry him. I sort of got engaged, but I knew I didn't really want to.
Right.
Farmer.
Not engaged because you didn't want to get married and sort of draw the line in the sand, or
a bunch of reasons. I just massive commitment phobe,
right.
Massive.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, there's more to life. There's more this, that, and the other. I didn't know what it was, but I just didn't want to settle. I didn't want to be a farmer's wife at that time. I just thought there was more going on. So he'd asked me to marry him. I'd said yes. Then I said no. I sort of half got involved with someone else. Then I met the banker guy, but it was all just a bit of a mess in my head. So I think now I probably just went, all right, I need to get away from that for a while.
And Hong Kong was perfect.
Yeah, Hong Kong was perfect for that.
And so you say 16 years. I mean, that's a long chunk of time. You're just having a good time and working hard in that time and building up your foothold in Hong Kong, I guess. Yeah,
and I was working hard. I mean, I will give myself credit for that. I sort of got this, and I'm pretty adaptable, get on with things. I was thrown into the job, the initial job, and just got on with it. Learned new skills, but you can in Hong Kong at that time. If you were, you could. It's just the nature of it. It wasn't as bureaucratic as sometimes London could be. There's a lot more dynamism about it. So I got headhunted by another company to go and do some consultancy work. It was great. A property company called Jones Lang LaSalle. Met a bunch of friends who are still good friends there. Always quite a lot of being a woman in a pretty male-dominated world, although I had a female boss at that company for a while. Used to get sent on assignments to the Philippines, to China, it was all such a learning curve, but I was like 30, blonde and
traveling the world and
yeah, at that time mainly Asia.
Right.
So it just took on a life of its own. You just kind of got on with.
Exciting. So I guess in a way, when you kind of envisaging yourself a few years prior to, am I going to be a farmer's wife? Sort of settled down.
Yeah.
That thing you kind of
manifested it.
You did. It happened, and you're on a plane going to Vietnam, and now you're going here, and now you're going there, and you're in this, and everything's fast. And
yeah, it's not something I imagined doing, but it felt quite easy and at home doing it, and the experiences were amazing in hindsight. And you would work. Anybody who was in Hong Kong at that time say, and it's still a very hard working place, would say it was a very expat community, but it was. I wouldn't have wanted to be there not working, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course.
If I'd been an expat wife, I probably wouldn't have been as... I had a lot of good friends who were expat wives, so nothing against them, but it just...
Widowed to the golf course.
Widowed to the golf course, yeah. And there's a dark side to it as well, in lots of ways, but yeah, and I just...
So when you're partying hard, you're an intelligent lady.
Yeah.
Are you looking after yourself as well? Are you doing any kind of training, any fitness?
I kind of got into sailing and... Yeah, I've never not been unfit, really. So I was doing a bit of that. Mm-hmm. Probably not enough. But I was eating whatever was available and just going out late and then going to work the next day. And you could at the time. Sometimes you go to work the next day and you'd still be a bit sort of,
Yeah.
But that was my first job. You change it, but then your bosses are doing that. Everyone's doing it, right? So you're just kind of like, well, this is cool.
Yeah.
There are lots of junks and lots of it was great. But I'd still be able to hold my own in things. But there was, it was a funny environment. And I was working very hard, but I was also finding the way I was getting through things was to be very. To work, not even consciously, I'd get on with the guys in the office who were really making the decisions. It was a fact at the time, so I'd always try and fit in with them.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, even to the point where I went on a course to Bangkok, and I ended up in a I forgot what it's called now.
In Bangkok.
Yeah, the red light. The not Pattaya. What's it called? That's
Pattaya.
Pattaya's in Phuket, but
Pattaya's on the mainland. So Pattaya's like maybe 2 hours south of Bangkok, and it's the beach town where basically the sex capital. I lived just outside of it for a little while.
Yeah. So, but I,
Walking Street.
Yeah, the guys would go down to see the sex shows, and I'd go with. It was that kind of dynamic, So. It was a funny old dynamic, but that's just what you did.
Well, yeah, and again, you've gone. You grew up with the boys. You're a tomboy. You went to school with the girls. Then you've gone to work with the boys.
Yeah.
So, where does Hong Kong lead? What happened?
Well, I got there. I was dating the guy at the time, but that didn't last very long. And then I met my husband.
Okay.
On junk.
Okay.
Hungover.
Right.
So, my now ex-husband. So that again, it's the work was working out. I met him, American guy, Cleet, great guy, lots of fun. He just left the US for the first time ever. Got there 6 months before I did. Never been out of the US before. 22, so it was just like, and weirdly enough, he just knew he needed to leave Texas at the time. So I met him, and we ended up getting married.
So was it like a whirlwind kind of a thing? So is he younger than you?
He's younger than me. So I'm 50. He's 42 now.
Right, okay.
So 7 years difference.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I think he wasn't even 30 at the time. I think I was so sick of English people. It was just, and I remember bringing him back here, and it was almost like it was, not meant to be, but there was just this dynamic thing that was working. Everything was just very different to what I'd been used to in terms of going out with people. I was in Hong Kong. We got married. His parents didn't quite know what to make of me because they're very traditional.
When you say traditional in Texas, what?
Baptist.
Yeah, religious
minded. But there's another backstory on that one. That would be a whole other podcast.
Okay.
But so, yeah, it just happened, and then we carried on working. Then we had Lucy.
And so, what's Cleet like as a dad when you say I'm pregnant? Is he? Are you trying? Is it like
not trying, but not trying?
Yeah, sort of allowing you married and you're going to be married.
But classic me. I was at work not feeling well, so instead of going, let's wait, I ran down to the local chemist, got a thing, went into the loos at work and said, I'm pregnant. It was just like very sort of matter of fact.
Yeah.
But the weird thing was, I completely freaked out because I found out I was pregnant, and we'd signed on a flat that day in Hong Kong, and property's expensive in Hong Kong, and I'd taken the mortgage because I was earning more, and we didn't going to get caught in the US tax system and that kind of thing. But I found out I was pregnant, and I got the mortgage right in the same. So suddenly my whole life was like, shit.
Yeah.
So it was all this parting. It was like, oh my gosh. What? It was. I remember it really vividly going, oh.
This is changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It all changed.
It's almost like it has to be that way for you, though, in the way that...
But extreme.
Yeah, kind of like... Yeah, but extreme, but like considered, though, as well. And thought out and pragmatic and open. All kind of... The opposites are kind of working together.
Yeah, it's a good way. It was almost like everything that's happened it just happened because it had to happen. And I think that happens for a lot of things, even the bad things. They teach something. But
so, how does Cleet take it then? We're pregnant.
I don't remember.
Right, that's interesting.
I called him on the phone, so I couldn't. Maybe I don't remember because I called him. I couldn't see his face, but he was happy with it. It's again traditionally. That's what you do when you get married. You have kids. But I freaked out. I really did.
Really?
Yeah, freaked out.
What in what sense? The responsibility.
Responsibility.
Am I going to be able to do this, or this is going to stop me from doing what I want to do?
I didn't think it was. I wasn't like, it's going to stop everything, but I was like, can I do this? It was. It was.
The universal.
But it took me about. I had about an hour of that. Then I went, I'm fine. It's going to be fine. I just get on with it because what can you do?
Yeah,
which is good and bad.
Well, it is. I mean, it's inevitable as well. I think there's no news we spoke earlier about the impact of children and children we take things for granted in children's lives. I mean, the news that you're pregnant, you're going to be bringing a human into the world.
Yeah.
That's some new, I know it from a man's point of view, and I've got friends now who are kind of at the age where, in 2 years when I've done this, when we've got that in place and we've done a bit of travelling and we're going to get, and you tick all those
never
boxes,
a good time.
you will still not be ready to be like, whoa. And even if you prepare yourself and you go, I'm ready, we're going to try for babies. Yeah. When she says we're pregnant, you just, whoa. You're just into the void of like, whoa.
Yeah.
I think that's universal. But you have to take that seriously, I think.
Yeah.
And sort of face that and sort of let it wash over you.
Yeah.
And if you are lucky enough to be happy and with somebody that there's a reciprocal
it was all there wasn't oh shit because we didn't want it. It was just it was a change. Yeah. But here's the thing, and Hong Kong's unusual for that. It's a change, but it's not a change like you would experience here, because what happens with most expats is if you're working, you hire a Filipino helper. So actually, your lifestyle doesn't really change much at all if you've got the financial capability to do so. So you kind of have this grown-up thing thrown into your life in a place where you really don't need to grow up, because you can outsource your childcare to
all of that responsibility.
To all the so, and on the other side of it, you can also just keep working, which is what I did.
Right.
Partly because I was the bigger earner, because I was older than Cleet. You know, he was brilliant at what he did, but you know, he was just at a different.
You were just
stage.
further along the line.
Yeah, he was at a different stage in his career to me. So it's not as scary as it probably would be, or as difficult practically as it would be here.
And did you birth there in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
And how was that?
Oh, it's like being in a 5-star hotel.
Right.
I mean, Lucy was late.
So were you induced, or
I was induced,
right,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was the birth?
It was fine.
Yeah.
It was, well, it wasn't, I had an epidural.
Right.
So I didn't really feel much. I was scared. And when we got up there, I remember getting up to the hospital and somebody just giving birth in the car park because they couldn't get there quick enough. I was like, oh my God, you know. Yeah. And I'd never been particularly motherly. I'd never been, I really have to have children.
Maternal sense.
No. Birth was fine. She was slightly twisted, but yeah, it was good. Do
you remember the feeling when she was in your arms first time?
Yeah, I do. I was terrified. I was I remember, because you put together this birthing plan about what you know, and I was very like, you know, you should clean her off and everything, which sounds awful now.
Well, again, culture paints a picture to us and sort of gives us a clean-cut version of everything. I mean, knowing what we know now, I mean, that's something that I've come to learn, you know, microbiome. Yeah. So vaginal microbiome on a baby to set up is all the precursors for immune. I mean, it is so important. Yeah. But we are in hospitals. I know. Clock ticks, and we want it to. And we worry about disease or all those things. It all makes sense. Yeah. And whichever way you want to look at it, it can make sense. But like I mean, my wife's a doula, so I've been educated kind of off the shoulder of like much more of the simplistic side of it. So I'm always intrigued to find out what birthing is like, because I've come to really be fascinated. Obviously, children, childhood, birth, you know, like the whole journey starts there. So you've got Lucy in your arms. This tiny
she was put onto my chest because it was quite. She was a bit twisted, so it took longer than what is the average? But it took a while, and I kind of I remember looking at her going, oh gosh, and it was just such a. I didn't quite know what to do.
Did you even feel like? It was possible that she's you, and my first son was handed to me. It was like I couldn't comprehend that this is.
But what did you feel?
Well, I had an image of him. I think aesthetically threw me as much as anything. I'd got really quite well prepared to actually, you know, as we mentioned, the initial kind of whoa, and then I sort of got serious about it. Thought, right, okay, I'm going to get into this. But then when I had an image of him in my mind, and I've got quite a strong image actualization that, you know, that's pretty consistent for me, and I thought he was going to be like a little bald, pale, blonde, thin, fair little baby, because that's what I was, and I'm, you know, and he came out and he was enormous with dark skin and black hair.
Oh, brilliant.
And he just didn't look like it was possible to come from me, you know.
Wow.
Which I imagine for some people must be a really alarming moment if you're not in a, you know, in the most trusting relationship. But I remember looking at him, and it just so happened that the midwives were taking my wife to I think it went to shower or something. They took her somewhere, and they had me remove my shirt and everything, skin on skin, and sort of left me with him. And the whole room was kind of empty, and it was just me and him. And he was massive. I mean, he was actually the smallest of our babies. He was £8.13, but he was
the smallest. Wow,
so fat. I mean, he looked like a little Michelin man with this black hair. dark skin, and I can remember looking at him and then looking out the window of the hospital, and it was Lincoln, and I wasn't born here, but I've grown up here, and thinking he's been born, and it just didn't seem real. Just
Wow.
sounds psychedelically
Yeah.
unreal, like. And I think a lot of that was aesthetic, because I think had he have been like what I'd imagined,
Yeah.
like a fair kind
Yeah.
of whatever my mind's eye image of him was, but
Yeah.
it did totally threw me. But I actually made a video of that birth. There's a video on YouTube of that. Of him being sort of black. It's only like a 3-minute
Yeah.
video, but I did it to
That's
kind of
amazing.
a song at the time. So I'll show him that one day when he's older. But no, I think the impacts.
Yeah.
How does everyone cope with that? I mean, it's
And people do it in different ways, don't they? Yeah.
totally. So how's Cleet then? How was Cleet when?
Cleet was just, you could see he was just kind of like, whoa, you know, just sort of didn't,
Yeah.
both of us were kind of like, well, here she is. And we didn't know whether she was going to be a girl or a boy.
Okay, so you didn't find out.
No, I didn't find out. So yeah, he was quite emotional about it all, of course. But
And what were those first few months like then, as you start to adapt? 2 high-flying city slickers, all of a sudden.
I remember being in the hospital. My mum flew over, actually. And we had a big argument about something. Can't remember what it was. And I was pushing Lucy in the trolley thing. And I remember just looking at her going, I really don't know how this is going to work. It was and I didn't bond with her straight away. Subsequently did, but I just didn't, couldn't compute. But we got home, and by that time we had a full-time helper, Deli, who stayed with us right until we left Hong Kong. So for 12 years, she was brilliant, lovely. So she was there, and I was already getting confused in hindsight about what my role was, because she knew everything, and so she kind of took on, I guess, what the grandmother role would be, because my mum flew in, flew out, and I was off. You only get 10 weeks maternity leave in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
So, and then you go straight back to work. You can take longer, but you don't get paid. So I only had 10 weeks with her. In hindsight, I should have done it for longer. But you adjust. And I would do the night feeds because I felt like I should. And Deli was also helping in the house during the day. So, and I wasn't. So I just didn't want her to be up all night. But it's quite a strange dynamic, because you don't, if I'd wanted to, I could have come out of that hospital, left Lucy with Deli, and gone back to work, because
that's the culture of the place.
Yeah, and arguably 10 weeks, that is what I did. So and she was perfectly well looked after, but the first month, because of how I was like doing graphs of how much she was drinking and Excel spreadsheets,
of course,
because I couldn't. It was such an alien thing to me to have been working so hard and very analytical and very just always on to looking after.
And do you think when as we spoke at the beginning of this conversation, with your memories of you being young, do you think, as you mentioned, if one of these things happens where we associate some kind of a trauma to something bad that happens to us, do you think it can work in the same way that, obviously, you're a baby, you're not going to know if you're being nurtured or cared for by who or what. Is there any subconscious thing playing any kind of a role there, do you think, in any way?
With me?
Yeah, like thinking like how do I explain it? Like your mum, what do you remember of your mum when you were really little like that?
Nothing.
And
it always used to bother me because I couldn't remember. I remember bits, but
flashes,
yeah, I remember bits, and I've seen photos, but I don't remember a huge amount.
So when you're doing like
I think it passes down. I think the energy of it passes down. I think there was a slight bit of
trying to work out is
there was a slight detachment. It was almost like you know,
Because intrinsically you maybe haven't had that put in you.
Yeah. And interestingly, your Alex, your wife might know a bit about this. My mum wasn't breastfed. She didn't breastfeed me, and I didn't breastfeed her. And I think that was not a good thing, because you then get and I had a real phobia about it, and I think that had come down
There's so many, I mean, that's something I come to learn, because, I wasn't breastfed, but then I subsequently found out later that the lineage was breastfed in but I was like the first to not be. And I didn't know anything about it, as most people don't, until, obviously, as I mentioned a minute ago, start learning when I was having my own children. Because I've got a little bit of pragmatism like yourself. Like when I was going to be a parent, it was like, right. And I had the blessings of the internet, so it's kind of like start, and measuring one thing. Okay, so that, you naturally go to all the things that you know that happen for you.
Yeah.
And then I'm sort of looking at and I'm going, oh.
It's funny, you just made me realise, I think I had quite a male reaction to her.
Yeah, possibly did.
Yeah,
and that would make a lot of sense.
I had a much more male reaction to her than a motherly reaction. Again, it's changed now beyond, but it was all like, practically, how am I going to look after this baby? Am I going to have enough money? And I took all the responsibility myself, and I didn't need to. Pete wasn't asking me to do that, but that's what I did. Right,
naturally.
Yeah, it's just how I was. But I went back to work after 10 weeks, got back into work, then started getting all the mother guilt about not being there, even though she was well looked after, which then sort of translated all the way through to what happened. So, but it was a good time. I mean, she was, on the surface, we had a beautiful daughter, and we could still keep going out and everything like that. It's it's interesting. And Deli, our helper, was brilliant.
So you go through those early stages of parenting, you're adapting, you're doing spreadsheets and bits and bobs and trying
to... How embarrassing.
Well, no, because that's your...
That was my programming. It was how I could understand how she was working, and I did the...
How long did that go on for? How long were you kind of...
Well, I got very obsessed with the Gina Ford way of parenting. So, you just... It's quite a structured way of raising kids, because it fitted in with the lifestyle. I wouldn't do it again if I had another kid, but not that that's going to happen. But I became very pragmatic about it all.
Yeah, that makes sense, because your environment is
pragmatic.
Is that your emotional attachments are kind of a bit more distant?
Yeah,
it feels like
it was almost like I was suppressing all my femininity and the maternal things for whatever reason, which goes back to childhood experience, and I've since learned before that as well. So you don't even know you're doing it. No. It's just how I thought I should be, but in the back of my mind, I wasn't comfortable with it, if that makes any sense. There was something underneath going,
Well, we're getting there now, aren't we? We're starting to... And without, I think that's one of the most difficult things about breakthroughs, epiphanies, or, and I think it's something that we all do. We're all suppressing certain niggling truths and dialogues inside ourselves, because we know if we let that lid off, you've got so much to contend with.
It just throws everything upside down.
And it's the status quo often can win that race of like, you kind of know that in the back of your head, so I'll make these kind of small tweaks. But so you leave Hong Kong, why, when, what?
Leave Hong Kong, so fast forward to 2018, so Lucy would have been 10, 11 then. We left because of what happened in 2016.
Okay, then. So take us in the lead up to that then. So I think we're close. Lucy working, life's moving along.
So Lucy born, life's moving along. I'm working for Jones Lang LaSalle at the time. Then I get headhunted by HSBC So thrown into, another environment, a whole other kind of company, big, corporate, much more multinational company. Getting paid more progressively each time. And Cleet and I are sort of benefiting from that and from his job as well, sort of materially. We bought a house in Hong Kong and everything. And I was doing things like I went into Panerai, Panerai watches, the sort of flash watches, 2 months after I had Lucy, and thought, I'll just buy Cleet a watch. It was that ridiculous, It was kind of, it's that weird dynamic. So that all progresses. Fast forward to 2008, which is when I started working for HSBC, right after I just got in before the financial crisis happened. So slipped under the door before all the banks obviously started going through a lot of crap. But I was on the property side rather than the banking side. Worked for a great guy there. And I remember the company I left had been doing consultancy work for them. And I remember someone saying to me, in 5 years, you'll be running that division. And for the world I was in, that job was one of the best jobs in the world for my area, Yeah. And I was young at the time, and I was like, yeah. But bugger me, 5 years later, I got promoted. I got promoted very quickly, and was running that. Had a new boss come in. I will mention him because he was brilliant through everything that subsequently occurred. He just started with HSBC at the time. So again, originally working in Asia, then started flying around the world, getting paid a lot, but the job, when I got the global job, it was supposed to be in London, but I asked to stay in Hong Kong because Cleet's job was there. Lucy had been born there. Life generally was better there. I get paid more than being back in London. My commute was 20 minutes instead of what it would have been in London. Everything. I just didn't want to go back to London. So they let me do the job from Hong Kong, but most of my core team was in London. So I worked hard anyway, but I was literally working 24 hours because...
The clocks,
because of the global timescales. And enjoying it. But starting to seep into it all was a bit of, how did I get here? So, should I be doing that job because... Did they put me in the job because I was a woman? Because the whole thing that was, the thing that has come up now is, you're trying to get women into jobs.
Feminines.
And actually, in hindsight, I got the job because I was bloody good at what I did. But in the back of my mind, they've even given me that job because I'm female. I then got offered, actually, back up. Before I got the global job, I was offered to go and work in New York for HSBC. And that was a 3-year offer. I said, I don't want to go for 3 years. But I knew that if I did it, my career it would really be beneficial for my career. So I went to New York for 6 months and I left Cleet and Lucy in Hong Kong.
Right.
So moved and did the US job. But again, it was great, but it was weird because I was living two lives. I was like living in Manhattan, single, inverted commas single. And then my family was back at the ranch, just getting on with stuff, and left Lucy with Delhi. And it's funny how history repeats itself because I left at about the same time. And I was talking to a lady I work with, sort of counselling, and she was going back over things with me. She goes, it's repeating itself because you left Lucy right at the time your mum was away, like just not available to you for 6 to 12 months. And I did exactly the same thing. And I remember getting there, landing, going, I should be doing this for my career. It's great. And I went down to the banks of the Hudson and I sat looking over the Hudson. I just burst into tears. I was like, what am I doing? Right? I stuck at it, and I'd see them every 6 weeks. Again, great. Lucy and him came over to New York. On the face of it, you couldn't want for better, right? Did everything. They moved house while I was away, so I went back to a house that I hadn't lived in. And
God,
so it was. And I remember we went to a wedding in Mexico through all of this, and we left Lucy. I'd flown from New York, Lucy and Cleet had flown to Texas. Cleet had dropped Lucy off with her grandparents in Texas.
Yeah.
Flown to Mexico. I'd flown to Mexico. And I remember just looking at it and feeling really discombobulated. I'm like, what am I and where am I? Because my family were all flying all over the place. My daughter was happy, but in one bit. I'd just flown in from here, and it was starting to really like, I don't feel very grounded. But again, on the face of it all, gilded life, the 1%. It was funny. So that then everything started. So there was so many different things happening that my circadian rhythms were off because I was flying all over the world. I was not eating well. I'd be drinking. I'd be talking to people, good friends of mine, and sort of thinking, oh, should I have this job? I remember hearing somebody say, Jane got that job, but why did she? You just heard. I heard something in the office. Something dodgy happened to me in New York with a guy, a colleague. Just we're out again. It's the whole Me Too thing. I was out drinking in the corporate culture, but he started getting really
bit too close.
And nothing happened, but he sort of tried to pull me out of a lift and all this kind of stuff, and people had to get involved. But and that really upset me, which was unusual for me. So all these little things started to go, not started quite right.
Connect on,
got back to Hong Kong, carried on with the job, but then I found out I had I wasn't well, sort of. I found out I had an ovarian cyst and things, or fibroid. I also found out I had HPV, which is lots of women get it, lots of men get it. It's a sort of STD could have been from years and years ago. And obviously had a freak out about that, but the doctor's saying, look, everyone gets it. Don't feel bad about it. You could have got it from when you were like 18. It just sort of showed itself now. But the doctor said to me, you can have a vaccination for that. And I'm not in. And I went, okay. So I went to have this vaccination.
How did you feel about that going in? Did you second thought, or just, this is what we're doing?
Yeah, this is where the weird starts. So I was freaking out because completely catastrophizing, which again, in hindsight, I should have realised my brain wasn't functioning rationally, because as soon as I found out about my fibroid and this stuff, I'm like, I'm going to die, right? And then what will Lucy do, and what will Cleet do, and taking all the responsibility on myself, and they would have worked it out, but it wouldn't have been nice, and I wasn't going to die, but it just everything just started going mad in my head. So they asked me, said, you can have a vaccination, and my smart brain went, vaccinations prevent, they don't cure. But I ignored my smart brain, and I went in and I looked at this woman, this Chinese American doctor, and I said, what's in this? And I never asked that, And she told me, she goes, oh, look, just have it, it'll get rid of your infection. So I left. I said, I don't want it. And I left. And I got back into the office. And I remember hearing my grandmother go, in my head, who's dead, go, you're strong, Jane. Don't be so stupid. Go and have it. Literally like that. I was like, okay. So I went back and I felt guilty because they'd opened it, right? I was feeling guilty because they'd opened it and it would cost them money.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the young Jane.
Yeah. It's all they'd. So completely irrational. Had this vaccination, and a nurse gave it to me. And I remember, it's so vivid. She put it in my arm and I felt this pain shoot down my arm. And I just got an overwhelming sense that I was dead. I mean, I can't even explain it. It's like, I have just killed myself.
You've just killed yourself with the vaccine.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Hang on.
Did they tell you what was in it?
They didn't tell me what was in it. They just said, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. People take this all the time. I subsequently found out a lot about the vaccine that wasn't quite true. And they shouldn't really be giving it to sort of 48-year-olds. But anyway, that's another story. I think in the US I probably would have had the ability to sue. But
really?
Yeah, I mean, they sort of hand out drugs willy-nilly in Hong Kong. So I had this whole feeling I just killed myself. Of course, and I went back to the office and sort of my PA looked at me and said, "What's happened to you?" I said, "Oh, nothing. And of course, then I started looking up about the vaccine.
How did you actually physically feel then? Did you have an adverse reaction at all?
Not straight away. Not straight away. I just felt it was such a weird. It was almost like I went into shock because that's what I felt like. I started having this sort of not physical panic, but mental panic about it. So I went back to the office and I'd done a bit of research before on the vaccine, but not a lot. I started looking up about this vaccine and, of course, found out 101 horror stories about it. But it's actually, it's for 9 to 14-year-olds mainly. So your kids will get it.
Right.
Unless you ask the...
Well, yeah, we don't do any vaccines.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, exactly. So it's to stop the transmission of HPV, which causes cervical cancer, which is ironic in itself because cervical cancer doesn't kill that many people. You know, but there's a lot of horror stories about that vaccine and other vaccines, obviously, but that one in particular about what it can do to you. And I just went into panic about it. Now, I don't know whether it was the vaccine itself or me reading about what the vaccine could do to you.
What triggered you to read it? Just the feeling. You're having this feeling though, aren't you?
I was having this feeling that I just killed myself. So it was almost instant. My body was sort of saying, get that shit out of you. Right? Because it was almost like that. But it would contrast that with this voice in my head from my granny.
Saying to do it.
And
this is granny who you've got fond memories of who looked after you?
Yeah, it was her. I remember I was walking past bloody Longchamp. I don't know how I remember the shop, but I do.
Yeah, well, it's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So it was such a contradictory, like, light and dark, black and white reaction. So I started researching it, but research would be a sort of calm term for it. I was just obsessed with, like, what has this done to me and how do I get it out of me? Because you're supposed to have 3 for it over the course of 3 months, I think. So I didn't go back to the others, obviously. So then I just went straight into whatever this is in me, I need to get it out because there's all these stories of teenagers just completely changing their personalities, you know, getting their legs going weak, a few of them dying, you know, so many stories about it. So I went straight into, I need to detox this out of my body. It was like a almost visceral reaction. So how do I do that? You know, stop drinking, start eating better, get some detox stuff to pull heavy metals because aluminium in it. But that was happening. But over that weekend, it was a long weekend, and we had some people over for lunch on the bank holiday. I just started feeling really strange after I'd had this vaccine. I hadn't. The other weird thing, it was Cleet's 40th birthday that I'd done it on, and I hadn't told him I was having it, which was really unusual as well. He sort of said to me, "Why didn't you tell me you were having this?" So, but I remember on the Monday, and I just couldn't. I was almost detaching from myself. I remember sitting, looking around the table, going, "I really don't feel like I'm here." It was. I felt so weird. And then that night, I started getting pains in my legs. That morning, on the Tuesday morning, I got up and I went to the loo, and there was all this. It was just awful, and I thought I am dying. Everything my whole system just went bleh. Right. I started getting pains down my face. I started sort of.
That sounds horrible.
Tinnitus, everything. It's just my system. It felt like somebody had put a sort of electric plug into my system and gone, and everything just went wrong.
Just fucked your wiring up.
Yeah, so I went back to the doctors. I said, look, I don't know what's happened, but I'm getting all this numbness and I can't feel anything, which does happen with vaccines sometimes. Had all the tests. The doctor who gave me the vaccine clearly looked disturbed because I think she'd been told she shouldn't have given it to me. And
oh dear,
she was, you could see her going, oh shit, you know, why did I prescribe this? But it was done, really. So I went into overdrive, and I started losing weight. I couldn't keep any food in, but I had every test in the world to see what was happening. And they said, you've got, one of them was, what's the thing that, there's a syndrome that lots of people, does happen after you get vaccinated, where you go numb for a while. And they said, it'll wear off. Anyway, even now thinking about it, it was just so bizarre. I would kind of feel heavy, then light, and then I couldn't stop. When I went back to work the next week, I couldn't stop talking at all, and then I couldn't look at things. And then certain people would come in to see me, and I'd be fine. The next person would come in to see me, and I had verbal diarrhea with them.
Your wiring's just
my wiring just shot to pieces, and I was getting sparks up my spine. I was.
And what kind of period is this? Is this in a couple of weeks?
It started about 3 days after the vaccine, right. And I became obsessed with. I'll admit it. I'm done. What can I do about this? I cut out everything out of my diet. Yeah, I thought, shit, what have I done? So I was overreacting to everything, and I couldn't sit still. I started not being able to. Whenever I touched computers, it would give me electric shocks. I'd walk along the road, and suddenly I feel like I was sinking down into the road, but I wasn't. It was so alien, and I kept thinking, I'd look at Cleet and Lucy and think I'm going to die. And it was my birthday the following week, and we went to Singapore and I couldn't function. My legs just kept giving way underneath me, but I could still walk, if that made any sense.
I've tried ketamine before, and it's very
Is
simple.
it that was it? They gave me ketamine. Maybe that was it.
I mean, those sensations you talk of, I've experienced them, but not in this way. I mean, the terror you've got psychologically at the moment from having a vaccine, your body, your mind's told you this at the time you've had it. You've said yourself, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
You've then started to research. You've then had that influx of information, and you get behind the curtain of, because on the face of it, we're having the injection, we're having the tablet, we're having the thing, the antibiotic, and this is what's good for you, and we don't ever think any more about it. That's Western medicine.
No.
You mentioned earlier when you're selling these things,
Yeah.
Like, it's just, this
There's
is what it
the
says,
irony
this is
of
what
it,
does,
right? I know.
And so now the terror you're having, your body's not responding. Never mind, not responding. It's malfunctioning.
Yeah, it was completely blown.
Physically.
Yeah, and I will never know whether it was the vaccine or it was that was just the icing on the cake that triggered it. But whatever happened, it sent my body and brain into overdrive, like shock or. I don't know, but
how long does this go on for then? And how what things did you start to do in terms of your diet or exercise or trying to detox, juicing? Did you start to notice?
I started
improvement.
No, this honestly, to different leveling. This went on for 18 months.
Fuck.
It wasn't. It wasn't. And there's bits of it physically now. My body's now catching up with my brain's all right now. But I would argue my brain was never not all right. But that's another. We'll get onto that. But it went on for a long time, which is subsequently what made us leave Hong Kong, because I was obsessing about the water I drank. I was obsessing. It was everything that I considered to be dirty. I was like, I can't have any of this. I wanted clean food. I wanted everything, because I just was thinking, I've put all this shit in my body. So and it was that. In itself wasn't healthy, actually, because
and then you're cutting out loads of microbiome that's vital.
And psychologically, it was telling me, I was telling my body that something was wrong as well. So but I didn't know that at the time. But the message I was sending is like,
so you're just from.
I was already
probably
I probably already had something. I put something in my body that wasn't really good for me, right? But it probably wasn't as bad for me as I'd manifested it to be, and I think I probably gave my body a bit of a shock by stopping drinking, I literally went from one way of living to another. But
and are you sort of educating yourself in this? Are you looking into? Is it specifically like health diets? Are you looking?
I was,
into,
but I was looking into it in a very unhealthy way. I was just like, I've got to sort this out. And in the meantime, I was trying to sort of keep going at work, but I couldn't. I was sleeping an hour a night.
Whoa.
But during the day, I was fizzing. It was so much overdrive. And the fortunate thing
becoming
is,
delirious. I'd imagine.
well,
to a degree.
yeah, it was. I don't know. Anyway, it kept going, and then I started having sort of dreams about things. I was literally I'd sit in my house and look over at a flat, and I could think what was in there, and it just wasn't right what was going on. Then I started, when I started to really worry about it, I was worried about it anyway, but I started wanting to push people over, and I started wanting to, I'd want to throw myself off buildings, but I knew I wouldn't, if that makes any sense.
That compulsion kind
yeah,
of. Yeah,
but I'd always had that. If I get to the edge of things, I was like, I can't go too close because I want to jump.
It's strange, isn't it? I think that's quite a ubiquitous feeling. I mean, I drive across train tracks now, and I always wonder.
What?
Well, I wonder what it would be like, because I can imagine what it would be like, but I always imagine just bang.
Yeah.
Just if I drive over this train track and someone's missed something and just wipe out.
Yeah.
Similarly to that kind of thing where you stood on top of something and you think, I could jump off it.
Yeah.
I could jump off this.
Isn't
that strange?
I know. And where it comes from could be anything.
So you're feeling that permeate down into your life to the point where you're like, I'm going to push you
and then,
over.
then I started wanting to, push. I was looking at Cleet going, I really could imagine pushing him over.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking at the dog leads and thought, what if I walk down to the construction site down there and just hang myself? And I kept resisting. That was a weird thing. When it started to move to that, I was like, but all the way through it, there was something inside of me, something there going, watching all of this, right? Just looking at it going, yeah, you're going to be all right. But I was watching all of it. But that's what kept me going, because I was literally just, that's what started me to worry, because they say when people start thinking about like, that's when you need to. And I was looking at my computer going, oh, shall I look up things to, how do I, that's kind of, but I really knew I wouldn't, but I felt like I would at the time. So that was all happening. And I eventually told Cleet, I said, look, and he knew there was something not right, because he said, you just don't look like you.
Yeah,
and even Lucy said to me, she went, this was heartbreaking. She goes, where are you?
How old is Lucy?
10. She goes, what's happened to Mummy? Because I just looked like I'd gone.
Yeah, your eyes are,
everything, everyone who, but then I could flip and be all right for a bit. But physically I was in a shocking state. I went down to about 47 kilos. So
Jesus.
Wasn't much really. Sensitive to everything. And so went through a load of tests to find out if there's vaccine done any damage to me. But if you dig deep enough on anything, you'll find something. So all the sort of traditional doctors, but my heart was racing all the time and everything was, but they couldn't find all my vitals, all my bloods, nothing wrong at all. But I was losing weight, and they just couldn't figure out. So then inevitably they said, it's stress and anxiety, which I'm like, no shit, right? Because clearly my body was. And so classic Hong Kong fashion, you need to have some pills. And I wasn't sleeping. So I thought, I just don't do pills like that. And even when they gave them to me, I said, and they were mild antidepressants. I'm like, I'm not depressed, but I was rageful. I was just had so much rage in me for some reason. Mm-hmm. And, my heart wasn't in taking these pills. So in that respect, they were never going to work anyway. But I just knew they weren't the answer. Mm-hmm. And they work, don't get me wrong, they work for lots of people. But it just...
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier. You know, there's a prevention, there's not a cure.
Yeah.
And there's the right time and all those things. And
yeah. So saw a doctor who prescribed this, and then once I started having this sort of, I want to jump off buildings and push people off buildings and sort of thing, I thought, things aren't going well. And then one night I was at home and I wasn't sleeping. And I lay down and I felt like I was going to go down I fell asleep, I think. and I felt like I was going down a massive rabbit hole, like literally.
I don't want to make any light of this, but literally sounds like. Have you ever heard the phrase "the K-hole"?
No.
Never the K-hole, which is ketamine.
Maybe they gave me ketamine instead of a vaccination.
Well, I won't digress too far, but our sponsors for the podcast, Go Deep Flotation Therapy, the whole idea of flotation, which I'm going to talk to you about, actually, because I think this would be really helpful for you if you haven't done it already. But the guy, John Lilly, who was the inventor of the idea and I guess the mechanics of floating as well, I think it was the 50s, late 50s maybe, he was a bit of an eccentric scientist, and they set up flotation therapy. Essentially, I think it started quite cumbersomely as like a helmet, and it was the idea to cut the senses off from the body, so sight, sound, etc., 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 to measure the brain and see how it reacts. And what they learned was that these amazing things are happening, like frequency, energy, meditative brain state. Hitting delta and theta brain states, and like 30-year practicing monks hit these kinds of waves, and you're achieving this in a tank. And he started to take ketamine. I mean, he lost his way a little bit, but some of his work. I mean, he dissected like dolphin language. I mean, he's like at the helm of communicating with dolphin. I mean. Really,
because it opened up something else.
Yeah, some weird things open up now. Back to sort of today, a recreational drug use. Ketamine's kind of known. You've explained some things that are very, very similar to what happens when you go down a K-hole. Like, very, very strange. But it's ironic because I bring that up because floating, which we'll talk about more as you finish up, I think something's going to be really, really useful for you.
Okay.
It's so good for the tuning of the body.
So this is what then prompted a whole other series of events to happen. So I was at home, trying not to wake Cleet up. I was downstairs, couldn't sit still, then crashed out, but then went down the K-hole, rabbit hole thing, and came back and literally felt like I'd had a near-death experience. I thought like I'd almost died and come back again. So what made me do this, I don't know, but I called my boss in London, who was the global COO of HSBC, so on the board, right? And he knew nothing really about what was going on because I could still pick up the phone and sound all right. And I said, I really need some help. Now, it was a bit telling that I called him and not my dad or Cleet, because I was it was almost like I was trying to keep my work life going so I could keep everything else.
It feels like to me that's the dots like I'm connecting. Like that's the
work had become my sanctuary, right?
Going back to when you were a child, and I'm on my own. I'm going to sort this out myself.
Yeah,
and I can do this, and I will do this. Almost like that. You've then created this. You're the breadwinner because you're further down the line career-wise, and that's you're holding it together by doing that.
And
for
all
these
self-created.
people.
No one's asking me to do this. I'm just doing it, right? It's because I'm choosing to be like that. And I call him and I said, look, if I die, I remember, if I die, and he's like, Jane, what? If I die, can you make sure, we can sort out my bank accounts so Cleet can get access to them? And because we had separate bank accounts because of tax, reasons, legitimate tax reasons,
of course,
and all this. But he then called HR and said, look, I think Jane needs some help. And I eventually ended up, by my choice, I said, this isn't working. I felt like I needed to go somewhere that I'd just be cared for, like just put in a pod and shut off. And I didn't know what else to do. So I said, look, I think I need to go to the Priory or something, because they'd given me some drugs. I'd taken them and they sent me WAPO. They sent me to the point whereas before I was going a bit mad, or so I thought, but I knew I was all right. These were just, I took it like 2 nights. I said, this is not the answer. So I just stopped that.
Good on you.
But I said, so I voluntarily checked myself into the Priory in London, and work were brilliant. They said, yeah, okay, that's the answer. I had to fly over from Hong Kong to there with a nurse. And they had to sedate me on the plane, right? Because
Jesus Christ, Jane.
Yeah, I know. I remember my brother saying to me, hearing about it, going, what the fuck is going on? So, and the nurse, they put me in a wheelchair to get me through the thing. And in the meantime, they come and pick me up from the house. Lucy's going, what's going on? I'm pretending I'm going to work to her, so not to stress her out. for a 2-week trip. And they wheel me through the airport, and the nurse says to me, she goes, "We're going to give you some sedative, right, to help you sleep on the plane." I'm like, fine, because I was so wound. But talking to her like I'm talking to you, which was the bizarre thing. It wasn't like I was off with the fairies.
I just wanted to interject there. How were you when Lucy was in your presence? Were you able to kind of,
I could function, yeah, but she knew I wasn't right. But I was never losing it or anything like that.
You kind of managed to recognise.
I was wound so tight. I was trying to hold it together, I think.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
you're talking to the lady just like we are now.
Like we are
You're
now.
Kind of back on
and she's looking at me, and we're having. She goes, "Why are you going?" She was literally saying to me, "Why are you going?"
It's new to her, and you seem fine.
Yeah, and she goes, "I'll give you some sedative." She goes, "By the time you're in the lounge, you'll probably be asleep, right?" She gave me a sedative. We got 2 hours into the lounge. She goes, and I was still having this conversation with her. She was like, and so I said, "When we got on the plane, we'll give you another one." She gave me another one. Did nothing. She goes, "It could have tranquilised the horse," but anyway, I get to the Priory. Biggest mistake of the whole process. It was just...
What, going there?
Yeah, shocking.
Shocking? Really?
Yeah. It was, again, I think if you...
What, the wrong environment, the wrong treatment, the wrong people?
It was the one in South London, where is it? Richmond. Not near Richmond.
Is it Richmond?
Roehampton. Down there. Where all the celebs go.
Yeah, I was going to say Pete Doherty and Amy and all those guys were there, weren't they?
But they go for addictions. I was there because I was on suicide watch, if I'm brutally honest. Got there, they couldn't. They shoved me in a room. I was in this room without anyone talking to me for about. I mean, it was probably the worst experience. When I look at mental health care now, and it's made me quite interested in it. It couldn't have been worse. Actually, the guys were doing what they could, but they just didn't know how to. And they put me with a bunch of people, and I'm sitting there going, "What am I doing with all these people?" Right? And eventually, the day after I got there, and I did go in at short notice, the psychiatrist came and sort of interviewed me, and he said, "Why do you think you're here?" And I said, "I really don't know," because he didn't. And anyway, he wanted to prescribe a load of pills to me, and because I was there, I would hide them under my tongue, and I'd pretend to swallow them. It was literally like one flew over the cuckoo's nest, because I'm not having these.
And selling them on the wing.
Yeah, and
to the other inmates.
Yeah, I mean, but some of the poor guys were there.
There's a pattern though, isn't there? With sort of here's a patch, pills of some pills.
Yeah,
and some pills.
And there was a few people in there that I got to know. I was only there a week, thankfully, but because I had the wherewithal to get myself out of it. But they were on like 15 different pills. And I'm like, how can that work? Because they're all contradicting each other. And there was some people who really needed the help. But I was there for a week, and it was just, they'd just been bought by a Canadian hedge fund, and they were obviously trying to save costs. It was just, it was, for me, it was a really not the experience I needed.
Well, it feels, I don't want to judge anything, and I'm certainly not going to, it's a broad stroke, but it just feels like that commodification of everything.
Of care, of the most, and they had these groups, so they had the people who were anorexics in one group, they had the alcohol people that you weren't allowed to sit with, who would come in for day treatment on another bit, and they actually were probably treated really well, because that's what they specialise in. They had my group, who was a mix of, there was one lady there who had postnatal, they just put her in there. There was another girl who was so far gone that you could just not see her coming back from anything. Drugged up to, there was a guy who's just there with anxiety. But I could see it all. And even the psychiatrist said to me, goes, why are you here? Someone else gave me a set, and they could not figure it out. And I said, am I bipolar? Am I schizophrenic? None of those, right? None. They said, no. I said, but my system was on fire, even to the point one night I had a panic attack. I had massive, literally.
Scary.
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere, and I thought I'm not going to get out of here. Anyway, I got out, went back to my parents for Christmas.
How were they with you, Jane?
Have
they been, you've gone off high flying, are they super proud that you're a high flying
Yeah, they never said
financier?
it though.
Really?
No.
Oh.
But of course they're proud.
Of course.
But they never, but I've talked about this with my brother, that's my parents all over. You just.
So how are they when you come back? Can you feel empathy? Can you feel compassion? Can you feel care? Are they looking after you?
Well, in that first stages, I wasn't back officially there, and I was staying with them for a bit because I thought that might help. But I wanted to kill them as well. It was it was almost like everything that, sorry parents, when you're listening to this.
Because a tough time.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I think partly what that was all the fear, aggression, rage, stuff that I'd held back when I was a kid.
It's a lifetime.
It just suddenly came out and misappropriated itself. It wasn't that I really wanted to. It was just what I associated. All the bad things, there were multiple good things, of course, but all the bad things that I associated with it came out, and I just wanted to. It was, anyway. Went back to, anyway, I was there at home, wasn't getting any better. They couldn't figure out what to do. I couldn't figure out what to do. So I went back to Hong Kong. I mean, I could go on forever and I just sort of carried on in this weird situation with doctors trying to figure out what was wrong. Eventually started leading into the more holistic alternative. Which
is a mindset initially, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because to even allow that in, you've got to allow your mind, this downloaded, pre-imprinted Western culture of how we fix ourselves or not. You've got to leave that in one place.
Yeah.
And allow this, what we think of as woo and...
Yeah.
Just to allow that in is
a big thing.
It's massive, but it's half the job.
Yeah, it is. Just to accept that there is an alternative way of doing things.
Let's explore this and let's not just shut it out.
Yeah.
And then you kind of opened a door there.
I did have some help. There was a really good GP actually who sort of was into this a bit, and he sort of said, you might want to start exploring this. So that the door started to open a bit through different things, but I really wasn't getting any better. And Cleet and Lucy were suffering from it, and eventually, after the journey into the more alternative stuff started there in Hong Kong, and but it wasn't really. It was making me see what could be done, but it wasn't really making me any better, if that makes any sense. It was almost like I was being taught things, but I had to stay unwell, so I learned more things, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
It was like, we're going to keep you unwell until you've learned all of this.
It's kind of a Buddhist kind of...
Yeah, and it's just like, and I kept just getting introduced to new and different modalities to heal. But again, I still wasn't getting any better. So we eventually agreed to come back to the UK, which was a big thing in itself. So we sold up there. In the meantime, I'd been to a clinic in Switzerland to try and detox myself, which just made me worse. I was having some unusual experiences there.
What was that like? Because I know Switzerland, again, on a slight tangent, they've got an interesting approach to like heroin addiction and things like that.
Oh, right.
I know that they sort of decriminalise and they treat it as a health issue as opposed to a criminal issue, and they seem quite liberated in that way. I don't know.
Yeah, so the clinic, during my research on vaccinations, this clinic had come up. It's the Paracelsus Clinic it's not far from Zurich, and this guy, Dr. Rao, was doing biological medicine, right? And that was it's not spirituality, but it's looking at the body and its processes as a whole. And they'd had a lot of success in helping autistic kids, and they treated cancer and everything with different... So I went there at great expense. I was freaking out about the money and everything because I thought I'm going to lose my job. I was still employed by HSBC, actually. My boss had been brilliant. He said, take all the time you need. And so I went there and was surrounded by a bunch of amazing people and doctors, but their whole process was to test everything in you, look at the different nutrients you needed, some acupuncture. So it was halfway between pure spirituality and the allopathic approach, which was fine. But again, my body just freaked out. It was almost like I was trying to do too much to it, and they were putting things in me, and I was in my head. I'd had something put in me that had done me damage. So
in the first place,
everything was just going, and I was having kinesiology, and even my body was telling these people, don't do anything. And I'd been having loads and loads of dreams about war zones and things, and they all started shifting into, like, I was seeing things that I'd never even heard. I was seeing Jesus, and I was seeing Buddha, and I wasn't really into.
Any reason why war zones might have you got any experience?
No. But again, I think it was metaphorical. I think there was just a war zone going on in
your life,
in my life,
mind,
in my brain, in my body,
consciousness.
It was all, a lot of it was symbolistic, symbolic in the end. But I went from very dark dreams and out of body dreams. I'd literally be looking down on myself and getting thrown out of my body. It was violent. I was literally, and then one night I got this whole thing, like this Indian guy came up to me, grabbing my face, going, "It's your third eye, it's your third eye." And at this time I had nothing, didn't know anything about this. Thought, okay, I am really going mad. So eventually moved back here, and I think just the move itself helped a bit because I kind of got away from the Hong Kong thing.
Are we not back with your mum again when she moves and gets to Lincolnshire?
A little bit, yeah.
But things
and
disassociate
she told me that actually. We started in a good way. We started having conversations about that. But then I put too much expectation on it. I thought, I'm back. Right, I'm going to be better.
That's it. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would have been better not to have it. And I was freaking out because I'd moved Lucy. She'd left Delhi, who'd brought her up as well as I had. I was worried about my job. Again, I wasn't getting better because I was worried about everything. Cleet and I weren't getting along. I'd made him move and he wasn't ready to leave Hong Kong.
Did this mean his job change and everything, or did the company kind of...
The company were brilliant. And this is the other thing. This is why I ultimately believe this was all meant to happen, because his company said, well, they were brilliant. They said, we'll move you to Amsterdam. So they did. And he's now there. We're divorced, but, we get on fine. And his job's... He was ready for a change, and I joke. I'm like, oh God, I had to go through all this to get you a freaking better job. It's like, cheers, mate. It's the ultimate sacrifice.
It's kind of your mum again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your mum got your dad the job by being the one.
God, you've got some good insights. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, maybe it's that. But he's with the same company, so yeah.
Well, that's nice. That's a nice thing then.
But once we got back, it just another set of issues raised their heads, whereas I started feeling a little bit more grounded. Cleet and Lucy moving, not even back for them, to a new country, right? Because Lucy wasn't born here.
Yes, total new.
Yeah, Cleet's American. So we then had to deal with all the issues. And our marriage had never really been tested in Hong Kong because we had a perfect life. And if anything wrong happened, you could just pay for it to be fixed, or our helper would fix it, honestly. Yeah. So we got thrown back into the real world quite hard, and it just didn't survive. And it's not his fault. It's just he looked at me and he said, "You're a completely different person." He was right. I had completely shifted, and it's come full circle now. I'm the same but different now. But at that time, he goes, "You're not what." He knew,
and the trauma and all of that tidal wave of events, and just the whole pulling the rug up from everything is
everything.
Such a shift in
everything. So we just threw all the dice up in the air. The fortunate thing was I had the house in Bassingham that I've been renting out, and again in a bizarre manifestation period. I remember when I bought that house, we'd sold some property in Hong Kong, and I wanted to put some money somewhere. Again, fortunate. And I bought it. I thought, I can always live here if things go tits up.
You remember thinking that?
I remember saying it like twice to my dad.
That's where you grew up in Bassingham.
Yeah, and it was almost like I knew it was going to happen, or manifested it, or whichever way you're going to look at it. So we came back, and so many different things happened, but I ultimately ended up leaving HSBC. And I went backwards and forwards over that because that had been my rock for such a long time, earning my own money, doing my own thing, having that stability. And I would keep going down to see my boss, and he was really good. And I told him everything. I was completely open with him about even the more woo-woo stuff that was going on. And he just said, as much time as you want. And I tried to resign 3 times, and he wouldn't let me go. And eventually, when I went down, I sat in Canary Wharf with him and said, look, I really want to leave. He said, now I can see it in your face that you're okay to leave. But he just didn't want me moving countries, getting divorced.
Not having that security.
Yeah, he says, I don't want you throwing it all up at once. So he he really helped me through the whole thing. You know, and they say the banking world's dog eat dog, but there's some good people.
There's good people
in it everywhere.
There is,
right?
and there has to be, isn't there?
So
you know, so Jesus, wow, I'm gonna have to get my breath.
So,
that is so. You when you're back in Bassingham, you sort of painted the picture there for Lucy and for Cleet. Cleet's from America. Lucy's been born in Asia. You're back, but for you, it's home. Bassingham.
It is sort of,
but you're familiar. So
yes.
They're going through the changes of like this is a complete new country, as well as you're going through all this stuff, and they're adapting to you and trying to work out how to be. You're coming back here to somewhere that's kind of home to try and glean something from it to help you get back on.
Just
your
try and
feet.
get grounded. Yeah.
But in that process of that, it's kind of highlighting to Cleet and. Hang on, we're not what we were, and we're not going to go where we were going to go, and this is all changing. I think you mentioned he was like turning 40 or early 40s at the time.
Yeah.
So that plays a part because, you know, you think about the stages of your life and in your own dialogue. So you guys, when you start to have those, when he says that to you and you have that conversation, he's like, you're not who we were. How do you feel there? Are you accepting of that? Like, this is the end of this?
Well, I mean, we'd started those
just...
conversations in Hong Kong.
Right.
Yes, I acknowledged that I wasn't who I was, and I was frustrated that I wasn't, because I kind of wanted to be that. But at the time, I wanted to be that person. I was really mad at myself that I couldn't
fix it.
Fix it. Yeah, just like, you know, why is this happening? So. I'm not really sure what you do with that. He wouldn't or didn't want to, or maybe we both didn't want to go for counselling around it. But there was so much going on that it was hard to know where to start. So
with Lucy then, how do you guys approach it with Lucy that you're going to separate? And do you sit down with her? Do you?
Yeah, we... So Cleet was working from home, but in Amsterdam. We'd been over to a friend's... in the summer to a friend's 50th with a load of Hong Kong friends in France. And it was already really wobbly then, because we were just not... I would look at him and just go into a rage at anything. I mean, it was that... And actually on the more woo-woo side of things, and this had started in Hong Kong, I would touch him and I'd see all these colours in him.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, yeah. But, you know, where do we go with that? It's just... and I was looking at it going, this is just weird.
It's weird how weirdly similar that experience is to what I mentioned earlier, this K thing. It really is, you know. Obviously, it's when on you know, no... What you've gone through is traumatic, and it's something...
But it's done the same process.
But those feelings, though, what I'm saying, that psychedelic nature of what you're expressing here, which you're referring to as woo and what have you... And I have this in the tank as well, in the float tank, you know, really, really strong visual concepts, images, like literally digitally there.
Yeah.
You know, that I manifest, and I'll have a split moment because you drift in and out in the float tank. You drift in and out of these different brainwaves, and like I can visualize things. I think I can visualize things. I see things, and then for a moment I know that I'm in a tank and I can see it, but it's there, and I know I'm looking at it, and then it just dissipates.
Yeah.
But it's as real as real.
It's amazing, actually.
But for you to have it in that circumstance, like I know I'm doing that in the sense that I know I'm recreationally able to do it. Like, so if I use psychedelics, like a mushroom or a DMT or anything like that, I know that I'm going to do that. Like I'm setting myself up to do that, and I want to glean the lessons from it. Yeah. You're going through something you don't understand.
Correct. I got thrown into it without any help.
Yeah. A warning or anything.
A warning.
But you're getting all of these kinds of psychedelic.
Well, I started having. I started having. I started seeing a lot of numbers, and it would come to me, and a lot of animals would come to me at night and things. And when I started researching these, it makes sense through a lot of. We'll get onto it, shamanistic stuff, and Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, and that kind of stuff. But it was all just there, and ironically, my boss at HSBC is now left, who's going to do philosophy. This is why he was quite...
Yeah,
he was open to it. He kind of got it. But back to Clean, I was seeing energy, but at the same time I started having dreams about philosophers and about the evolution of humans, and more recently, because it still happens, but I'm in control of it now, quantum physics.
Wow.
And I'd see the other side of the universe, and I'd see all this stuff going on. But of course, at first, I was like, oh my God, what? And to pull that into a relationship that has been quite gilded. So poor buggers, all of us really, we were on the highway to nowhere really with it. And at the same time, trying to keep it from Lucy, that she wouldn't, trying to keep it stable. So back to the question was, how did we handle it with Lucy? All this is going on. We decided we were going to separate, that he was going to go permanently to live in Amsterdam. And we picked our time. There's never a good time for anything like that. And we just sat down and said, look, we're going to get divorced. And she just burst into tears, and we did the usual, it's not you and everything. And like all kids, she's like, what about Christmas? All the practicalities and things like that. And she'd seen me starting to get a bit better, which helped.
Of course.
But it was just another thing to be thrown at her. I uprooted her life, and then that was coming. So I then started feeling all the guilt about that. But we've handled it as best we can, I think. And she's, this will manifest in some way in the future. But we're trying to do the best we can to help that. But Clete and I have very different, not that his is wrong or mine's wrong, views on how that should be, really. But I think they complement each other ultimately.
That's perfect balance.
Yeah.
When there's a respect for that, like you said it there, not neither right nor wrong, but different. Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, but it's taken us a long while to get that, and he's. I don't really talk to him too much about the woo-woo stuff because it's just not his. How can you expect anyone to understand it?
I'm coming from a point of like, I'm a music maker by intrinsic desire. Psychedelically, I'm somebody who's gone searching for these kinds of things that you're experiencing by trauma. Really, you've had a vaccination that has triggered. The only person I can think of that that's had an experience that is psychedelic like this that's been so impactful is David Icke.
Well, it's funny because I am. Years ago, I'd look at David Icke and go, "What are you talking about?"
As everybody did.
Yeah.
The first Wogan thing was just
But I look at some of the stuff he's saying now and go,
"Well,
I get it. I get it."
The reason I point him out is because as I mentioned there, I've come from these kinds of conversations in my circles are the commonplace. Because we're amongst some of my closest friends, we go searching for these kinds of experiences and insights. To hear somebody who's had this. And like I say, it's David Icke's the only person I can think of that's had this kind of epiphany moment where he hasn't used drugs.
Yeah.
He's never been a drug user. Hasn't gone searching for anything, but he had this moment where everything imploded and his life went upside down and chaos ensued and he just saw the world in a completely different way. You've had it in an even kind of stranger way from this trauma, from a vaccine. And you're experiencing and you're open to these kind of psychedelic notions, these shamanic notions, but you've got nobody to
at the time.
Talk to
at the time
about it at the time. And your closest people, I mean, I luckily for me, my wife, she knows I'm pretty far out and she can kind of, even though she hasn't got a clue what I'm saying, she knows she can engage me on it and kind of keep me somewhere that feels safe or whatever. But to be in your position.
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. And the thing that was happening at the same time, and there's a book, Your Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, wow. You've just said that. I just bought my stepdaughter that book. So my mum's reading that book at the moment.
Right.
One of my brothers, I'm hoping, is going to read it. I think I want all my family to read it. Bezel Van Bezel.
Not Folk or somebody else's. Yeah, I can't remember his exact name.
Something. He's a Dutch guy. Taught in America.
Yeah.
Amanda, who's on a previous episode. I mentioned that book to her. and obviously she's
Yeah.
a hypnotherapist.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
She said that's like the Bible, but that book for me told me so much.
Yeah. So exactly that. So I kept, as part of this, I kept getting told about bits of my body, right, in my dreams, because my body was really on fire. And again, my digestion's still not quite right. But what's been happening, and then this is where you come into the whole, I learned about the whole Kundalini thing, and it's all the same, it's called different things in different cultures, but it's the same thing. But it basically, you store all your emotions in your body, right? And because of when I was a kid, I just absorbed anything, didn't let it all out. So it's all, I've got like layers and layers and layers of stuff stored that it just keeps coming out, because I started going through a whole shaking process, like my hand would go or my leg would go. And I now know it's just my body, like dogs and cats do, trying to shake off the stuff
energy,
that isn't there for it, right? So, but that whole principle of the body keeps the score and the consciousness piece, it all comes together eventually, because we don't really know, even brain surgeons say they know 5% of what the brain's conscious of. And all the pieces of the puzzle start to link together, because I was dreaming about human evolution, and I think we are evolving into something, because we're not Neanderthals anymore. We don't have to hunt and gather. And so something's happening to us. And you say you've only met, David Icke relates, but the more I've looked into this, there's a lot of people experiencing this, and it would have previously been labelled pure mental illness, actually. But it's not.
No. Awakening.
It is an awakening. And there's I read a book called Am I Bipolar or Am I Waking Up, right? And I think there's a line that gets crossed where you are waking up, but you lose a little bit of control of it. That's when probably a different intervention, whatever it is needed. Now, I was fortunate enough, that's that core thing, which I now know is my higher self, true self, whatever you want to call it, was holding it together. And I just see it as all this stuff spinning around me. You're learning from this. And it's still the only thing, because I still have my days where I'm feeling, and particularly physically, just not right. But something will pop up, like an emotion that I've forgotten, and then it'll feel better. My body will feel better. Now, what I had to go through was, and it depends on your perspectives on this, was clearing out a load of stuff even before I was here, like generational stuff or previous, because I would dream about Auschwitz and stuff, and I was never there. But then, or I'd dream about Nagasaki, and that's collective consciousness. And you get into a bit more esoteric stuff here, but I was just holding it all in my body, which I think all humans do.
100%.
We just don't know it. And all the experiences I'm having, I put inverted bad things and the more enlightening things, everybody is capable of having. But I met a woman, again, perfect synchronicity. I was trying to get better. I was on this thing called NES Health, which assesses your energy system to see what's up with it. And I watched a documentary that comes with them called Choice Point. And it's Richard Branson and a bunch of other luminaries talking about the world being a bit of a mess. And there was this woman on there called Alison Potier, who was an investment banker, American. And she was talking about stuff. I thought, I really need to speak to her.
Yeah,
right, I didn't know why.
Walked a similar path, I
imagine. So I looked her up, and I actually found her contacts quite easily. And I wrote to her and didn't expect anything back from her. Wrote to me overnight. She goes, I knew you were going to call because you've seen me going to call her, right? And she was a big shift in me starting to master this and get to grips with it, because she explained to me she used to be in Canary Wharf trading during the day, and at night she'd be spinning around like the Sufis and having all these visions and feeling people and, but I cried when I spoke to her, because it's suddenly like, shit, I'm not going mad.
So important.
She was phenomenal, and I still talk to her on a regular basis. And she says to me, you're going to do great things with this. which I'll get to, but that in itself initially made me think, I've got to get on to doing, and I had to really take a step back and go,
let it be.
And I kept getting Let It Be, the song.
There you go.
I got George Martin in my head for it was like all the Beatles songs were coming at me, and George Martin, though he died, just saying, chill out, because if you listen to a lot of the Beatles songs, their lyrics are very consciousness focused.
The Beatles have been an absolute education for my children's lives. You know? The Beatles were my first band that I adore them to this day. And it's funny, you know, again, I'll not digress too far, but it's come up serendipitously, which is lovely. You say about the lyrics and the consciousness of the lyrics. I'm actually waiting. I've got a Paul McCartney life-size cardboard cutout coming in here, because he's just universal love, isn't he?
Yeah.
And so my kids, when we first started getting into music, it was maybe... we were travelling in the car. It was maybe about 3 years ago. My oldest would have been maybe coming on for 4 or something. And there's always been music on, but I would actually start saying to him, and I'd come across a guy called Nick Drake.
Yeah.
Now, Nick Drake's like the lost, forgotten, amazing songwriter from like the late 60s, 70s. I'd never heard of him. Someone put me onto him, and he plays this beautiful kind of off-tune acoustic stuff, and he's just fabulous. And someone gave me these albums, so I put them on. I said, and they're lovely for the kids in the car, because it's just this lovely music. Pink Moon album was I was playing at the time. I was saying to the kids, you know, should we have to listen to some music? And they'd say, Nick Drake, Daddy. And put Nick Drake on. Anyway, a few weeks go by that, and I thought, I was in the kitchen, and I said to the oldest, I said, should we have some music then? He said, yeah, can we have Nick Drake, Daddy? I said, well, we're going to play John Lennon today. And he's like, John Lennon? I said, yeah, John Lennon. I said, he was in a beat. And in that moment, I thought, right, I'm on a little thing here. I said, he was in a band called the Beatles. And obviously, you start thinking about the Beatles, and he's 3 or 4 or something. He's like, oh, the Beatles? What, they're Beatles? I said, well, kind of. And then I'm thinking, oh, you know, we played him a John Lennon song. And then I realised, oh, we're playing some Beatles songs. And he starts in his drawing. And I showed him a picture of John Lennon. Because John Lennon used to do the drawings, didn't he? He did the children's books. And he's got a very sort of particular drawing style. And I showed him. And he's asking me about him. He said, where's John Lennon now, Daddy? I said, oh. And I kind of, on the spot, I thought, what do I do here? Like, this is my oldest. And he's asking me about somebody that I love. And this whole music thing's happening. I'm in music, and so it's great. And I'm thinking, do I tell him that he's dead? Or what do I... Yeah. So I said, well, he's dead, darling. And he's like, dead? And I said, yeah, he's not here anymore. He said, why? I said, well, I'm thinking, shit, where are we going now? For fuck's sake. I'm like, well... I said, well, because he was I said, the Beatles that you've been listening to? He says, yeah. I said, well, they were like the biggest band in the whole world. Everybody loved their music, and everybody was so happy when their music was on. I said, but unfortunately, I said, there was a naughty man, and the naughty man, although he loved John and the Beatles, he was not very well. And I said, and he hurted, this is the words I said, he hurted him to dead. And he said, oh no. I said, yeah. I said, but he said he wasn't very well. And he said, so he's not here anymore? I said, no, he's not here anymore. Anyway, he said to me that he liked the music, and we carried on playing the music. And I remember looking at him and thinking, I saw his little mind work. Like the idea of being here, not being here. So totally not music related at this point. It's kind of like, and John Lennon's kind of my idol. I mean, I've got a signed disc. Anyway, I saw his little mind, not here, not here. I saw it happen. Anyway, the next night, 24 hours later, I'm in the kitchen preparing something. He says to me, Daddy, and we got the music on again. He said, look at my drawing. He said, did the naughty man who killed John Lennon look like this? And we hadn't said a word since the night before. And he'd done a drawing, and it was kind of like just a face with pointy eyes. And
oh, it's giving me the shivers, this.
And I thought, Jesus Christ, he's been, that's been in his mind, that's permeated his thoughts, and so then that kicked off this beautiful thing where I obviously knew they were ready for music and to pay attention to it from the Nick Drake thing. And we don't have telly and radio and all that, so I've been quite conscious of not having
Yes.
them imprinted with the
Yes.
culture's version
Yeah,
of
yeah.
whatever it is. So we start playing Beatles songs, and I'm on a right roll because I'm like, fucking hell, I haven't visited this music since I was 15, 16, properly, with that
Yes,
vigour when you're
yeah.
like exploring it all. So I'm like, Yellow Submarine, Me, Mr. Mustard, Rocky, all these songs that are just perfect for the kids. So we start playing them. I get the guitar out again and I start playing. And we go through probably 18 months of just solid everywhere we go, because it's about the same time as we get acquainted with Spotify and all that. So you realise, we just put it all on. And so we listen to all the albums and, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but we went through so many times when they would ask questions. Daddy, so she's leaving home was an example. We were going to a nursery one morning, driving down Carham Road in Lincoln, and my middle lad said, Daddy, why is he saying that my baby's leaving home? Is she a big girl or is she a baby? And I said, oh, well, he's saying his baby because she'll always be his baby, even though she's a big girl. And he's trying to get his head around it. He said, well, why is she leaving home, Daddy? I said, well, because Mummy and Daddy love them. They probably love her too much. Maybe, and like she needs to go out into the world, and she's ready to be a big girl now and have her own life, and she wants to go, but she's going to leave a letter, and she's going to let them. And he started crying, right? And this, I could cry now. I saw a tear roll from his eyes. The second one's younger, second boy, and his tear starts rolling. I look in the wing mirror at my wife's. And we're all having tears rolling because these kids are discovering the concepts of like real life.
Yeah.
And I'm having another thought on top of that, thinking we could be in the car now listening to Radio 1 and listening to,
a load of
no
crap.
offence, but some kid who's just talking about his Rolex and how he got it and slinging his guns.
It's moments like that you realise how off we've gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was going in the other way. I was realising how lucky we are and how beautiful this is. So sorry for that long digression, but that was that's been a really poignant part of like something I've recognised bringing my kids up. Like the Beatles became like a masterclass education, like totally organically alongside everything. Moments we'd be driving at the weekends or going off to club or whatever, and they'd ask questions.
Well, it's the simplicity of them sometimes, isn't it? It's just amazing.
But I learned so much more again listening to them. Listening to them as a man in my late 30s compared to being a 15-year-old kid. And my wife, who wasn't that, she knew the songs like most people.
Yeah.
We watched documentaries and stuff, and she was like, she realised the impact, the universal kind of, whether you like their songs or not, once you learn that once upon a time there was one channel on the telly and then these boys popped up.
Yeah. But that's interesting that you say you've listened to them again, because it just shows how your mind works. You've listened to the ones that got something out of it. Now the songs and the lyrics are exactly the same, but you've come to it in a different route this time, and your perception and what you read into it is very different and deeper.
When you're teaching or when you're explaining to a 4-year-old the version that you think they're going to interpret, like yellow submarine means this. We all live in a yellow submarine, and it's lovely, and the sun is yellow and the sky is blue and the sea is green. But then I'm listening to it again and going, I'm thinking, I'm with my friends and we're just sailing away, and we're just getting away from the chaos.
But that tells you it's your perception of on a more like whatever you perceive is it,
isn't it?
But it really is what you read into something that is exactly the same. Physically or sound wise, different people will read different things into it, which exactly shows how your consciousness works to manifest whatever it is you want out of it.
So to get back where we were, again, apologies for my long digression, but so you start to recognise you're having these dreams, animals are coming to you, faces, places, things. Your consciousness is like. I
started seeing things before they happened.
Literally.
Yeah, and everyone. My dad's like Mystic Meg. What are the lottery numbers? But it's not that. It's,
premonitions.
But nothing earth shattering. But I'd literally see a headline in a paper, and I'd write it down, and it would be word for word there the next day, which sort of freaked me out. And I actually realised I did this years ago when we lost our dog in Hong Kong. I was sitting on a conference call and I saw where she was, and I called Cleet and said, this is where she is, and that's where she was. Saw her. Literally saw her. which kind of freaked me out at the time. But so that got me thinking. And when I was talking to Alison, who's become a bit of a mentor, the lady on Choice Point, she says that's just reminding you. It is the universe reminding you that you have this ability, as we all do. Nothing to be scared of. But it's also when I started dreaming about quantum physics, you then get into the whole thing about I'm not seeing into the future. All I'm doing is accessing an energy that is already there. So when you get a bit out there and has happened, it's all happening at the same time. You're just accessing a different bit of consciousness. So, and in itself sounds really weird, but it calms me down a bit because I was like, well, what if I have a premonition about Lucy falling off a cliff? And I learned a really good thing. And I know people don't like her, but I watched the Gwyneth Paltrow. You know, she gets a lot of stick for...
no, I mean, you're in the public eye. Yeah. You can't please everybody.
She gets a lot of stick, but she's had this thing called the Goop Project. And she was exploring a lot of these things. And there was a medium there, and she was doing some... Because I started going to a spiritualist church as well, because Alison said to me, to release some of this energy, go and see if you can tune into it, right? So I'd do it, and then I was freaking out. I was like, if I'm on premonition, she goes... You'll know what is she goes, this medium said, you know what is real seeing stuff that's useful, and you'll know what is just your projection of worry, because it'll feel very different. So if you see, say, Lucy having a car accident or something, and you feel, that's just you projecting your ego, your worries, your shit out. But if it's something that is pure consciousness and your intuition, you won't feel that. It'll feel very calm.
And you'll act.
And you'll act. You'll do it instinctively, and it won't be scary. It might be a scary thing, but you won't be scared. And that's been massively helpful in realising that, A, there is this being present and trusting your intuition is what we should all be doing, but we don't. And then there's this projection of fear and anger that will cause you to worry about things in the future or stress about things you might have done that is just not you. It's the conditioning or the preconceptions that have been put on you. And it took me a long time. I would read all these books about higher self and, you know, true self versus ego. And it was all getting a bit too... I was getting lost in the spirituality of it. Actually, I was getting lost in the... Well, this is too out there, but if
and everybody's different versions.
Yeah,
of
and
it
you've got to live in the real world. You've got to live in this current version of the world. But you can, if you bring it back to like your true self is just that blank canvas, which initially is scary because then you have no identity, but it is, and then everything around it is just projection or perception. If you get it, you can come back to a place of complete calm, and then you can access what is in effect, and it all boils down to just the energy of everything, which sounds strange. So when I had an experience of messing around with this, and my brother had a sty on his eye, and I thought, let me do this thing I'd learned about just moving your energy. So he doesn't believe any of this, and you find the emotional cause of his sty and you clear it. So I did it, and bugger me, his sty went, but I got it the next day. What I've done,
does this kind of work,
what I've done is take, as is my way, my whole life, I absorbed it and didn't let it go. So that's no good for anybody. So now what I'm trying to learn and understand, and I've been drawn down the shamanic route, which has a lot of people have a lot of can't say misconceptions, their own views on what that is, but really it's just working with energy, and you don't have to jump around with a stick and a headdress on and everything with it. You're working with a energy and a belief in certain things, and acknowledging that there's good energy and bad energy, but it's all energy and you can just work with it. And when you start to get that, your whole world and perception changes a bit.
So is this happening? You and Cleet moves off. You've had the talk with Lucy. You're kind of settling into you and Mum and Lucy.
Yeah, now. Moved house, which was a big big thing.
So was that from Bassingham to
Navenby. That was a massive thing.
Mm.
It made, again, that we said my mum moving.
Yeah.
That it wasn't me moving back here. It was me moving from Bassingham to Navenby that started to really shift.
To feel that kind of...
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I walked into that house and
Yeah, you said that strong feeling.
Yeah.
So how are you and Lucy adapting to your dynamic as you two? You're now obviously reading things and learning things and repairing
she's very nervous of this kind of thing, and at first she wouldn't even.
This more esoteric side of it.
But now she jokes about it, which is a step in the right direction. And she's like, "Oh, you're off to do your woo-woo stuff, right?" Mm-hmm. And so she's opening up to it. I think because originally she associated it with me not being well.
Of course.
So, understandably, she's a bit... And she's like, don't you ever do anything on me? And I said, look, one of the things is you can't do anything on him unless they want it, right, or ask for it. So, but she's opening up a little bit to it. But I try and normalise it as well, because actually, when you really look at it, it is normal. People just don't know. Well, it's not normal. That's not fair. It's not common, right? But it's happening to more and more people. And when you look into the science of it and the spirituality, those two are coming together, and you can start to see how you use energy to shift things, manipulate things, and not in a bad way, and you can change it. But she's getting there with it, but our dynamic is so much. There was a time when I was really unwell that I thought I'd lost her forever, but she's fine now. And we're close, and she knows that I'm here in England and Cleet's in Amsterdam with his new girlfriend. I'm seeing my partner. So she's starting to put bits of the puzzle.
And she's 14.
She's 14. She started at school. She's gone away to school, to board, which was touch and go, but it's been brilliant for her. Absolutely brilliant. She's got a community of girls there. She's home every 3 weeks. I was a bit nervous about that, but it gave me a bit of space to do what I do without worrying about what she was thinking. And, you know, it doesn't make her feel like weirdly, she doesn't feel guilty she's with just me or with just Cleet, because she's got school.
Yeah.
So it's actually, she's getting her 3 little worlds slotted into place. And for her, having that stability and knowing that, she doesn't like, I said to Cleet, look, if you come over and I go away, you can stay in the house and she doesn't want that yet, because she's kind of
still adjusting.
Yeah, and she's got us in
separate corners.
She's got us in places where she is comfortable right now, which I understand. So give it a bit of time. So it's getting there. It's a bit of a way to go with her to understand this stuff, but she's 14. But I think the principles of it should be taught to kids. Actually,
you know, you took the words out of my mouth. I think again, coming back to young children that I have, you look around the culture, as simple as, I mean, you talk about energy. So much of that is fundamentally starts in our practical lives, in our diets.
Yeah,
you talked about this whole thing was you put something in your body. We're rearing children on disguised sugar products.
I know.
You know, and sugar to children is heroin to, you know, somebody who's broken. You know, you're setting up. And it's, I don't know, we've got kids at schools and we should be teaching them about their bodies, about how amazing it is that your body it works. And
yeah, it's an amazing thing.
And if your body's healthy and it's strong, it opens up your ability to use your cognitive function, you know, like your whole harmony, your whole resonance is in tune. Like you keep mentioning frequency, high frequency, low frequency, you know, that whole thing with children, to teach them like the importance of that, to understand that if we eat right, if we exercise, do you know how important it is if we go for a walk? It's, you know, like being outside. Yeah. We're up against it now because of screens and technology and automation. You know, it's something that it's probably my biggest worry as a parent, is like just trying to balance the total necessity of technology and evolution with trying to stay somehow, primal's too strong a word, but it feels like, you know, we've got to still
natural.
Go out and get out and be dirty, and get wet,
exactly,
and play and not be confided to. But all of that comes from education, and I think we do our best at home.
Yeah,
we do our best in the schools.
But part of that as well, it's not just the being outside, it's being able to form your own view about something without someone else telling you what it is. Because again, that's, technology in itself has done some wonderful things, but it's the constant stream of nonsense.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm really proud of, that we just happened to happen, that I'd just about sacked off. I think I don't know what book I'd read at the time. I'd read something. Because, my kind of change in consciousness wasn't anywhere near as dramatic as yours, but I was just banging my head against the wall, going in a certain direction, recognising patterns all around me, and just thinking, hang on a minute, I'm repeating this pattern, and I can see where this pattern goes. I can see the generations in front of me where they've just gone that way, and then I read some stuff. That's a great way to see it. And just saw, I can't remember, I read The Alchemist, that was one book that stood out. But I can remember thinking, you know what, I've just fucking get home from my hard day's work, and I press this button, and then this fucking world pops up in the corner of my room. And even though I think I'm watching something I like, in between every 15 minutes is this 4 minutes of just, and I say this on the podcast a couple of times because I think it's such a mundane, everyday thing that's so synonymous to our lives. Adverts. Marketing.
And damaging.
4 minutes of just these that have been scientific, like you mentioned earlier, the sales pitch, how you draw the pen to the card. They've started in a science lab, these adverts. How do we prick that attention, drive it to this thing? And then 4, 5.
But that takes me on to a whole other thing that me and my partner now talk about a lot, is because he gets all this. He's kind of, but it's just the whole, actually we are starting to live in the Orwellian society, because there's all this stuff being thrown at you, which adverts you could say is propaganda, just encouraging you to do stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But at the same time, you're being told how you should think and how you shouldn't think, and it's just a whole. And the kids, back to the kids, I think screening them from it is one thing, but actually teaching them resilience to deal with it and discern, not judge, what's good or bad for them is what needs to be taught in schools. I was a nerd. Even the way they measure kids in schools drives me nuts these days.
Just remember it, learn it, regurgitate it, spend time with it. Then as soon as you've done the test, you've got the mark, you leave it there and you move on. And active learning, engagement, creativity, they're on the back burner because, problem kids get put out the way, or kids who are struggling to learn, because that's affecting the top line of the school, and that's going to affect the funding and it's all
generated.
So the adverts for the kids, and we just you said it there, the ideas, it's about learning the resilience, learning what the world is, but there's a lot of nonsense that you just don't need to let in to just colour your world. We can I say it, I've got brothers and we talk about this often, you've got to kind of build a world in the world. You've got to understand the world that you're in.
Yeah.
And you have to know the parameters, and you have to know, but you can't be absorbed into it too much.
No, because it'll just damage you.
Yeah. And with the kids, that's just highlighted to me enormously. It's just like, we need to expose them to everything and teach them on the move,
Yeah.
And again, that Beatles thing was massive. Just that, if you zoom out of that and you replace those Beatles songs with, I don't want to name people, but there's a lot of algorithmic music these days that, again, has been down the marketing route, right? We need the vocal in on 16 seconds, we need 3 choruses, and we need the hook and the loop and the da-da-da-da, and it's just an
programming
algorithm.
people's brains.
And then all of the lyrical content, a lot of it now is young women, having to prove themselves in a sexual way to get their attention. So if my 3 kids are if that's what's subconsciously imprinting them, they're the mechanisms that they draw on, and the ideas and the values and the codes, so it's a crazy new world.
I know. You got to not pull them back from it, but just pull them out of it. In my moments of more optimism, I think it will come back around on itself. I hope it will.
Well, these podcasts, when I stumbled across podcasts, which started with, I can't remember when it was, maybe 2008 or 9, something like that, working on my own. It was kind of the shift between being able to get like music, iPods and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of at the point where you could get music on your phone. So I was working, and I can remember thinking, I was on these building sites, and subconsciously, the radio was just breaking me. Just listening to the guy with the fake voice telling you the shit off the paper, and here's another fucking advert, and here's the same song again, and this song's full of shit. And all of that, I didn't know at the time because I had to read some books to recognise it, but instinctively I was like, I can't fuck. So then I can remember someone telling me something about, so-and-so's, if you press this into iTunes, you can listen, just put in whoever you love, and it was John Lennon. And I wrote John Lennon into the iTunes search thing, and all these interviews came up. And it's just listening to interviews.
Yeah.
And then that turned into listening. I think at the time it was like Ricky Gervais had done his few podcasts, and then it was Russell Brand's radio show condensed down into what is now known as a podcast without all the adverts and all the nonsense. And I remember thinking, this is kind of really cool because I'm not getting the fucking formulated shit, essentially. And then it developed into, this is a podcast and this guy talks about this particular thing, and it's great because it's just people talking that you've never heard of. And then, fast forward into some of the bigger podcasts and like
it's amazing though, isn't it?
The education I've gleaned from
just talking to people.
The Joe Rogan Experience, which is a podcast now. He's almost gone into like territory now where it's like bands, you can't mention him because it's not cool.
Yeah.
But when that was introduced to me, it was an English guy called Graham Hancock went on, who was an anthropologist and a writer. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's formally an anthropologist, but he's a writer, and he wrote a book called Fingerprints of the Gods in the 90s.
Oh, I've heard of that, yeah.
And his whole thing is kind of prehistory, and that we've been here before, and we're kind of a species with amnesia, and that, these megalith structures and the pyramids and everything, this is like, this stuff's been happening.
Yeah.
We shouldn't write it off as like we're just,
No.
And it was his podcast I listened to there, and that was like, whoa, I was listening to this American guy whose voice was cracking me up a bit, with this English guy who's got, he's from Bath, and he's just this, but the topic was this stuff that I would have never, ever have picked out, but it was captivating. And then it triggered a whole thing. I get his book, and then I start the other people they mentioned on the podcast, Dr. Robert Schock from Boston University, who's the, and they used to think it was dust and sand kind of residue on the Sphinx that's dated, but actually it's water residue, and it's 12,000 years from the Ice Age, and actually we were walking, and like, oh my God.
I know, it's sometimes too much to take, isn't it?
I just went on like this absorbing, and it just reframed how I saw the world completely and entirely, like replaced mainstream media and ideas, newspapers. I used to get a newspaper every morning, which would reinforce what I'd just heard on the radio, which would reinforce what was on News at 10 last night, and don't go that way because there's paedophiles, and don't go this way because there's terrorists, and oh my God, if you live in this area, this is going to happen.
Exactly, and think about the kids. All they hear is fear.
Yeah, well, utterly, which is why we keep them inside, which is why they're always on screens, which is why we're disconnected from them, which is why we don't know them, which is why they grow up to be anxiety and depressed and like,
it's like you get on the tube in London and it says, keep a lookout for something that's going to harm you.
Yeah.
It's just like, God, give us a break, because actually the chances of you getting harmed are small.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole podcast there.
I know.
There's a whole podcast there, but it's so as we sit here now, how do you feel? What's the future looking like for you?
Oh wow, God, that's a big question. So I feel I need to be patient with it. I was very keen to get going properly with doing something with this awakening, this knowledge. And actually I was almost pushing myself too hard to find out more and try and heal things and what have you. So I've just taken a bit of a step back, just even more so. It'll keep pushing you and pushing you and pushing you just to be, right? And that doesn't mean doing nothing and not engaging with the world, but it's just like literally be really present. So at the moment I'm doing that, but also at the same time I have nominally opened up this thing called the Heart Shed, which is
I wanted to ask you,
so
you've
life
got
coaching, personal coaching, and I kind of doing it a bit voluntary at the moment, but it'll evolve into something. And actually, the people that I know who have done this more spiritual work, say, don't be voluntary because you need a value on it. You know, there's a value in what you do, and just treat money as energy. Don't think it's bad. Don't think it's anything like that. Because I think a lot of spirituality goes into money's really bad, but actually it's just an exchange of something for something, really. But you just don't get hung up on it. So that was an aside, but I'm doing that. But at the same time, I'm working with Alison, the lady that I spoke to you about, just on her experiences and how she sort of started to manifest this. She coaches CEOs now and tries to change how companies work to this more conscious way of being. So I'm working with her, but I'm also in shamanic practitioner training, which is learning.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, which is really good. So I'm doing a retreat in Spain soon. And you get treated, but you learn at the same time.
Yeah.
Just that culture, well, I say culture, they're all over the world, shamans, but how they view things, which has actually come naturally to me. I realised that a lot of this stuff for years I've been collecting. Like I have a picture from a National Geographic thing that I bought that I could not stop looking at, and it's a shamanic I mean, the signs have been there forever, but you never actually say you are a shaman. You just have the skills, which everybody has. But it's basically learning to understand the present, the energy around the present, that you can access different realities, and using those realities to ultimately help heal people. And shamans use drums, they use rattles, they use plant medicine, they use lots of different things, but ultimately it's the energy of that sound or what's in the plant, the intent that is doing the healing. And a really important thing is that I am now much better at mastering is you don't heal them, they heal themselves. You give them the channeling and the access to stuff to do that, because what I was doing and have done actually most of my life is take on other people's shit, and you can't because you're not well.
It's
so
a heavy load,
it's taken me a long time, and I
own.
think the things that I am still, when I do feel not well, it's because it's teaching me that, you know, stop doing what you're doing because it's making you unwell. So it's teaching me to be much more resilient and a little bit. There's a difference between selfish and not caring about others, but a little bit more, the whole thing about the self comes first. I think it's taken me a long time to get that, because
idea of, you have to
look after yourself.
You have to love yourself in order to be able to love and be happy to make others happy.
It's taken me ages. I didn't even realise I didn't, but I didn't. But once you can get that sort of grounded, that's starting to help me do it. And I can see that I am able to use energy to help people, as is everybody. I'm not unique.
Well, I think
I've just had the
Jane,
opening to it. You know, it's just so I'm really looking forward to when I start it. But my mentor, she says to me, "You can do it now."
Yeah, well, you are doing it now. I mean, this conversation
exactly.
alone,
She goes. You don't even know that you're doing it.
That is the beauty of it. I think as soon as your internal ego just gets pretty smashed up and you realise that
mine got beaten up.
We're all interconnected, everything, which is another psychedelic element that's just overwhelming. You just absorb, like I'm attached to the plants are attached to the trees are giving the air, there's such an overwhelming feeling. But just communicating, again, I'll come back to podcasts. This conversation, there'll be people listening to this that will have gone through all sorts of waves of like, whoa, and then, oh God, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And then things that will align and fit and things that will trigger things. And that alone is so powerful.
Well, it's funny. She said to me, and actually a bunch of unsolicited similar people have said to me, you will do this with your voice, which was interesting because not so much your hands-on, but you'll do it mainly with your voice. I'm like, okay. So
the Heart Shed then, if we want to send people to find you, where do they find you? I'll link you obviously in the description.
I've got a Facebook page.
Yeah.
My website isn't up and running, but it's best through the Facebook page at the moment. It's called The Heart Shed.
The Heart Shed in Facebook.
There's not a huge amount on it, but again, I've come to the realisation that I could put as much stuff as I like on that, but actually it's the one-on-one
the
discussion and the contact. And I think it'll just evolve organically. It's
What I would like to do with our sponsors, I've got 2 sponsors now because the lovely people at Function First, the Lincolnshire Cryo Lab, cryotherapy.
awesome, as I've been already.
Have you been?
Not for the cryo, I've been for the...
Oh, you've been for the training?
For the training,
Oh, because you listened to the first episode with Matt.
Yeah.
What a dude.
Yeah, brilliant. I was with Stuart, though, not...
Oh, Stuart, Stuart's amazing.
yeah,
I mean, all
good.
the guys,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
whole staff,
really good.
they're all fantastic. But they do the cryotherapy. So they've got the float therapy and the cryotherapy. And I think I would love it to get you back after you've done a couple of those sessions and see what you think, because you talk about physically as well with, you know, there's still maybe things physically happening. Amazing.
Really?
Psychologically, for these thought processes that you're having, for the float more, something else when you're floating through space, because you've seen space.
I know. I'll probably never come back. I'll just be there.
I mean, I'm actually booked in tomorrow. I'm going down to the guys tomorrow to do a 90-minute float. Episode 4. So at the time where we record now, the episode that's going to come out on Monday is with Go Deep, our sponsors, Kieran.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking a lot about it in there. But for you, I think with your story, with the whole physical trauma that you've had, I think, and anybody listening to this, as I keep saying in the intros and the outros, we should all be floating, because I think this discussion we've just had, even the mundane, you know, you don't need to necessarily have a standout trauma moment that happens. It's crazy being human. It's crazy trying to, on the surface levels of operating and getting everything right, and I'm a pillar of the community and I'm an upright standing person and everything's
You've got to get
okay.
your mind out of the way.
And in a float tank, in that Epsom salt water, which is magnesium rich, it's beautiful. You drift off. You can't feel where you end and the water begins, because you're all the same temperature.
That's brilliant, right?
And you just blip in and out of this place where you've been going.
That's pure energy. Then
It is pure energy, and it's your energy, and it's the universal gleam that you leave, and you know. And then with the cryo, you're going to get that blood shot into your vital organs at minus 145 degrees, you know. And then when you get back out and it recirculates and it's killed off all the weaker dead blood cells and just kind of rejuvenated you, and like basically like God's oil change.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it.
Skins, I often sort of put that with the float. It's like when I've tried to explain floating to some friends who aren't necessarily quite as, you know, what? A bath with, you know, what?
Yeah.
It's like God picking you up off the earth, whoever he is, she is, it is, and putting you in his garage on a Sunday. You know, like the old boy who just loves his MG. Yeah. Polishes it with love and nurture and care, and just takes care of it and puts every little bit back together again. It's like, that's what it feels like when I get out of the float. It's like you get out and you've just been...
The way you describe that is quite a shamanic way of looking at things, because literally you go on shamanic journeys and you see things fixing your... It's the same thing. You just, you know, anything can come in. It could be a sitting on a float, but it just, your energy gets moved.
Yeah, totally.
And we can all do that, whether we're helped with cryo or
I think
flotation.
You mentioned it earlier. Once you make a decision in your mind to allow something to be a possibility, whether that's an holistic therapy or whether it's just to stop getting angry at the traffic lights or whatever it is, once you allow the idea to come in, I think anything's possible at that point. And if you're brave enough to follow through to the unknown, you know, the unknown is scary for us all, but, you know, that's where beautiful things can happen. Yeah. And I think your story today should I mean, fucking hell, I'm going to listen to this and just get my head around it again.
I think your listeners are going to go, what the...
Well, I'm sat across from you and you're gleaming, you look wonderful, you've got an aura, you know, there's happiness in your eyes, you're glistening, you know.
I love all this stuff.
Things are on track, and it's been lovely, and I can only thank you for your time and thank you for doing this.
I'm really happy to share it. Thank you for listening.
And we'll do it again, and like I say, we'll get you hooked up. I'd love to know what you think about using those couple of therapies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll come back and talk about it, and it'd be amazing. I want to send people to the Heart Shed.
We'll do. If anyone's having similar experiences in particular, I think, you know, send them my way.
It'd be amazing. And I'll link you in the description so people can find you. And thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Marvellous. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, peace. Thank you for listening to Chew the Chat podcast.
Thank you for listening. For Chew the Cat podcast.
Chew the cat.
I want to say my own word.
Go on then.
Smash! Very angry.
Well, another epic podcast that. I mean, what do you say? What a turnaround. Jane's, she's got what seems to be all the kind of elements of the guests we've had so far, which is this kind of, I don't know, there's a willingness to encounter the unknown, to try the other thing, to move toward whatever that internal dialogue is trying to say to us. We've all got that internal voice telling us the things that we really ought to do, much like they say the gut feeling, the gut feeling is the one to trust. If your gut's telling you this doesn't feel right, it's, more often it's the right thing that is telling you the right thing. And it's interesting, you look at the science, there's actually, you actually do have brain cells in your gut. Your microbiome is linked to that whole chain of understanding that on a cognitive level. It's bizarre. Yeah, she's made a real U-turn, if you like, and she's happier and just more connected to herself, to her life, to where she needs to be now. And she's obviously using that experience now to help other people. And she's got a project, The Heart Shed, which you can get the link in the notes of this podcast. She's over on Facebook. It's early days for her, but she's sharing a lot. She's got lots of people in her community they're all sharing different experiences, and yeah, it's really interesting. And we need more people to be able to just say out loud to the rest of us how they actually feel and what's actually going on, and we can help one another. So, awesome episode. I love that. And while we were listening to that, before I was just going to do my outro here, my phone was popping again as it was in the intro, just links and things, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and there's going to be martial law and it's going to be penalties if you're found doing this and doing that. I mean, it really is a bonkers time. I'm in a group chat with my brothers, the 4 brothers, and we were bouncing ideas and links and memes to one another today, trying to make some light heart of it. But, we mentioned in there, this might be the only time, certainly for us, myself and them, and feels like nationally, culturally, dare I say globally, that maybe this might be as close as we can feel what it might have been like to live through that Second World War. Just having news bulletins. Hitler was famous for doing his speeches and addressing the world at night time. He was famous for doing that at night time. The psychology behind the fact that it was done at night, because night time is what we already have a natural fear of in our DNA. Darkness and the cold and shadows, and our ability to be encapsulated in fear is much higher in the darkness at night time. And I think, we're not to say that we're directly having an experience like that, but certainly the fact that we're all trying to plod on through our lives and without even necessarily being directly affected, we're getting the bulletins, we're getting the updates, we're in it, sort of. Yeah, really weird, man. Fucking weird time, innit? It's a fucking weird time. So, thank you, sponsors. Go Deep Flotation, Cryotherapy Lab. Just check them out. Just Google cryotherapy, Google flotation therapy. We've got time on our hands, learn some shit. Whether or not you take those things up directly or they lead to a whole different path of, holistic measures that can be made, conscious-minded decision-making for yourself. Do it, boy. This is a long podcast. I know people have got time, but I don't want to take your room up on your phone. So thank you, Go Deep. Thank you, Cryo Lab. Thank you, everybody listening. Take care of one another. Just, you got to follow your instincts. If you feel like you need to do something, do it. Look after one another. It's a fucking crazy time. We will be back in our next episode with a friend of mine who's a really interesting story of recovery, Mr. David McGregor. He's got a really interesting story of recovery from drugs and a life of just crazy bonkers decision making, and there was a bereavement in his family. He's lost his dad early and he didn't realise how that had impacted him, and it's a really interesting and heartwarming story, and he come through the other side, and he's a beacon of light for people who maybe are struggling with getting stuck in a rut, using drugs, and that's on its way. So listen, brothers and sisters, share this if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. We're all together, we love one another. Be kind, be brave. We'll see you again. Peace.